Welcome to Slow Sports. This time, we are slowing down with a story from the National Hockey League. New Jersey Devils was an organization that turned from a league-wide laughingstock into a feared machine that made hockey boring and calculated. It also made the team winning. In their heyday in the 1990s and early 2000s, the team featured names such as Scott Stevens and Martin Brodeur. This story moves slowly. It does not rush toward any moment. You can listen or simply rest while it plays. When you are ready, the story begins. The Mickey Mouse Club. The building was half empty and oddly quiet when the chant started. It wasn't a roar. It was a murmur that rolled down the aisles in the Meadowlands, a mix of frustration and resignation. People had come for hockey, but they were watching something else. Scraps of a plan that didn't fit together, a team wearing a name that hadn't settled into the state yet. The thing is, the New Jersey Devils weren't a joke to the people in the seats, but around the league, they'd become a punchline. To understand why, we need to go back to the move that shaped them. The franchise began in Kansas City, then went to Denver as the Colorado Rockies. Both stops were rough, sparse crowds, money problems, and a roster that couldn't hold on to talent. They arrived in New Jersey in 1982 with a new name, a new logo, and not much else. You know how a new gadget looks sleek out of the box, but nothing's configured yet? That was this team. The market was skeptical, the roster was thin, and the league didn't expect much. While that was happening in North Jersey, the NHL of the early 80s ran hot. Wide-open games, star power, offensive fireworks. The Devils stepped into that scene with a defense that leaked and an identity that didn't exist. The players worked, they cared, but there was no system binding them together. They were still unpacking their boxes while the rest of the league was sprinting. The perception set early. Casual fans saw the scoreboard more than the work. Media outlets looked at the standings and concluded what felt obvious. This was a struggling franchise missing a plan. Coaches rotated, prospects were moved too early or held too long. The farm system was more hopeful than productive. The Devils were searching for a single voice that could say, "This is who we are," and stick to it when losses piled up. There were bright spots, young skaters who flashed speed, a veteran who tried to set standards in the room, small runs of competitive play that hinted at something sturdier. These moments mattered because they kept the locker room from going flat. The thing is, even teams stuck near the bottom have small rituals of belief. A road win that pulls everyone together, a practice where the pace finally clicks, a bus ride that feels lighter than the record looks. But those moments didn't stack. They stayed isolated. Meanwhile, something else was happening across the river. The Rangers were established, loud, and under the lights. In Philadelphia, the Flyers carried an edge and a pedigree. On Long Island, the Islanders had just finished a dynasty. New Jersey sat in the shadow of all that noise, heat, and memory. It's like trying to start a quiet, well-run shop on a block filled with landmark restaurants. You need a niche and patience. The team had neither yet. And then came a line that stuck. Wayne Gretzky, frustrated after a game in 1983, called them a Mickey Mouse organization. It wasn't planned branding, but it became the story. Headlines loved it. Fans in other cities repeated it. The remark burned through the league. Now, locker room frustration happens, especially after lopsided nights, but this one hit a franchise still trying to hang a nameplate on the door. For the players, it stung. For the front office, it underscored the truth. Something had to change at the roots, not just at the edges. What nobody knew at the time was that the insult would become a pivot point. Not because it broke anyone, but because it clarified the stakes. If you're going to escape that label, you need to be relentless about structure. You can't dabble. You can't chase styles because other teams do. You build an identity that travels well on bad nights, through injuries, through noise. New Jersey hadn't done that yet. The roster told the story. They were talented players who could make plays in space, but the defensive coverage had holes. The neutral zone was a highway. Opponents entered with speed, crossed with control, and forced the Devils to defend from retreat, not stance. That wears you down. It eats at confidence. The goaltending faced breakaways and odd-man rushes more than steady, readable shots. Even strong goalies struggle when the game is tilted that way. The fans in New Jersey were patient in a way that didn't get credit. They built routines, weeknight drives to the Meadowlands, coffee in the parking lot, small talk in the concourse, a hopeful glance at the warm-up. They wanted a team that reflected the state, hard-working, unflashy, consistent. The thing is, New Jersey doesn't need a spectacle. It needs reliability. The Devils didn't embody that yet, but the desire was there. You could feel it in the low buzz before puck drop. Unknown to them, across town, executives in other organizations viewed New Jersey as a team you could outweight. Protect the middle, force them wide, and sooner or later a mistake would come. This created a quiet feedback loop. The Devils chased games, chased plays, and chasing led to more breakdowns. That kind of hockey makes every shift feel like an uphill climb. When that becomes a habit, it seeps into how a team practices, talks, and reacts under pressure. Key figures cycled through, coaches trying to install discipline in a league that rewarded risk, veterans trying to hold a standard without a firm blueprint backing them up, young players asked to be something different every season. Without an organizational identity, you end up borrowing philosophies instead of living one. A coach comes in with an up-tempo plan, but the roster's built for muscle. Another tries to lock down the blue line, but the forwards float too high. Everyone's trying, nothing clicks. What everybody sensed, even if they couldn't name it, was that the franchise needed a single architect. Someone who would define the job, set up the scaffolding, and refuse to tear it down every time a storm rolled in. The league rewarded teams that knew who they were before the puck dropped. New Jersey needed that clarity more than a single star, more than a trade that grabbed attention for a week. They needed a culture you could practice, scout, and teach from juniors to the big club. Meanwhile, the arena itself added to the vibe. The Meadowlands felt off the beaten path. You took a turn past the swamp reeds, past a cluster of lots, and walked into a bowl that swallowed sound until the crowd earned it back. On sluggish nights, that quiet was loud. On good nights, it felt like an engine. But the team had to give the building something to amplify. Without a signature style, the energy stayed trapped in pockets. One section singing, another sitting, everyone waiting for a reason to pull together. The front office faced real constraints. Budgets weren't endless. Free agency brought temptations that didn't align with long-term health. Trades could provide relief, but often cost tomorrow's stability. When you don't have an identity, the market pushes you around. You pick up the forward with the hot hand and try to build around him. When that cools, you retool again. It's a stressful way to run a roster. Stability isn't just about money, it's about a shared language of how to play. So what did the players feel, day to day? The grind of trying to be a playoff team without a North Star. Practice habits that changed with each coach. Film sessions pointing out the same gaps without a durable fix. You can work hard and still be misaligned. The real insight is that accountability lands better when it's anchored to something consistent. Without that, it can feel like blame more than coaching. 3 days earlier, something strange occurred. Well, not strange so much as telling. A mid-season game where the Devils played a tight, patient style for 2 periods, then tried to trade chances late. The opponent thanked them for it and skated away with points. It wasn't a lack of heart. It was a lack of identity under stress. Teams under pressure default to instinct. The Devils' instincts were scattered. And yet, there were seeds. A few prospects came through who had the right posture. Heads up in the neutral zone, sticks active, short shifts, line changes disciplined. A few veterans modelled the smaller details, angling on the forecheck, keeping the backside shoulder inside, shoulder checking before retrievals. These are little things, but they add up. They're the nuts and bolts that hold a system together. The problem wasn't the nuts and bolts, it was the missing blueprint. The Gretzky comment kept echoing. Even if players tried to ignore it, every road crowd had a version of it ready. That's the kind of noise you learn to tune out, or you use it. In New Jersey, it would eventually be used. First, though, there had to be a moment when the organization stopped trying to fix how it looked and started fixing how it worked. That meant hiring not just a coach for a season, but a philosophy keeper for the long term. Anyway, moving past the headlines, the franchise's early years in New Jersey were a study in trial and error. They explored speed, tried grit, leaned on goaltending, then tried to outscore problems. By the late 80s, the league's top teams had patterns you could chart. How they managed the middle of the ice, how they layered pressure, how they supported the puck under duress. New Jersey needed a pattern that could hold under heat. While that was happening, the fan base was growing in a quiet, steady way. Youth hockey in the state was starting to pick up. Rinks got busier. Kids wore Devils gear because it was local, because their parents took them to games, because even struggling teams give a town something to gather around. The identity gap on the ice didn't stop the culture from taking root in the stands. That mattered. When the system finally arrived, it would land on a community ready to sustain it. But there was one problem that wouldn't solve itself: the neutral zone. In the 80s, controlling the middle was more art than rule. The best teams turned it into a science. New Jersey too often backed in, giving opponents 3 lanes to carry with speed. That meant defensive zone time arrived in waves. It's exhausting. A goalie can't set edges confidently when rushes arrive in transition after transition. Defensemen can't gap tightly if forwards aren't layered. Forwards can't stay compressed if the read isn't shared. That's not a talent issue, it's a design issue. And design issues point back to leadership. Not speeches, but structure. A shared definition of a good shift. A quiet discipline that shows up in line changes, puck placement at the blue lines, and how you handle a 1-goal lead with 9 minutes left. The thing is, good design gives average nights a floor. That's how you build credibility. When your floor rises, so does your record, your confidence, and your room's patience. Then the ceiling gets closer. From their perspective, players wanted a reason to trust that patience. Prospects wanted to know what would get them called up. Veterans wanted to know what would keep them in the lineup when things went sideways. Without that clarity, fear creeps in. Fear makes you chase. Chasing leads to the wrong risks at the wrong time. Those were the Devils' early habits. In the aftermath of those seasons, the label stuck, and it created something useful. A quiet anger. Not the kind you burn out in a period, but the kind you put into your craft. Tape jobs, stick angles, shift lengths, close support, smart exits. Winning board battles without getting pulled out of structure. That's how teams reinvent themselves. And that's where New Jersey stood on the eve of a different future. A team with a chip, a market with patience, and a need for a builder with a plan. 3 years earlier doesn't apply here. What matters is the turning of the page. The franchise was ready to trade vibes for standards. Ready to make style a function of substance. Ready to stop being pushed by league fashion and start being anchored by a repeatable way to win. They didn't need someone to sell them on flash. They needed someone to hand them a blueprint and say, follow this every day, especially when it's boring. So, when the right architect walked in, the mood shifted before the winds did. Standards got tighter. The room got quieter. The media found fewer quotes and more results. Slowly, the team's habits, not the highlight tape, began to define them. That's the funny part about that old insult. It called them cartoonish. The response wasn't loud, it was meticulous. It was a system. By then, the fans in those familiar seats sensed it. The anthem ended, the puck dropped, and the first shift looked measured instead of frantic. The neutral zone didn't feel like a highway, it felt crowded. Opponents had to dump pucks they used to carry. Retrievals had support. Breakouts were simple, repeatable, and safe. You win trust shift by shift like that. The early identity as a struggling franchise had done something useful. It taught the Devils what not to be. They weren't going to chase trends. They weren't going to sell a brand without a backbone. They were going to be defined by how hard it was to get through them, not by how loud they were. The plan would come from the top. It would be drilled into the daily rhythm, and it would turn that quiet building into a place where leads got locked down. The perception in the hockey world didn't flip overnight, but the tone changed. Opponents began saying, "They're hard to play against." Media started using words like discipline and structure. Inside the room, the conversation shifted from, "We need to try harder," to, "We need to stay within it." That sounds simple. It isn't. It's repetition. It's trust. It's letting go of the hero play to make the right play. And here's where it gets practical. The Devils found key figures who fit this mindset. Not just stars, but pillars. A front office voice who didn't blink. A captain who hit like a message. A goaltender who turned chaos into calm and became a third defenseman with the puck. A coaching voice who turned the neutral zone from a liability into a lever. These people didn't bring fireworks. They brought alignment. Now remember, this is New Jersey. Steady beats shiny. The transformation wasn't a switch, it was a routine. Like a well-oiled machine, each part made the next part's job easier. Forwards funneled. Defensemen held the line with support. The goaltender read the dump and helped exit without panic. Shift after shift, the ice tilted toward control. That's how a franchise crawls out from under a nickname and grows into a reputation. Let's be honest, the early years were humbling, but they set the stage for the need for fundamental change. The insult turned into a mirror. The mirror became a plan, and the plan, once adopted, didn't just lift a season, it redefined the franchise. What started as a quiet building with restless fans would soon host playoff series where the score stayed low and the pressure climbed high, exactly the way they wanted it. The real insight is that identity is a daily habit, not a slogan. The Devils learned that the hard way. Soon, someone would arrive to enforce it. Someone who would standardize everything from draft boards to practice pace. Someone who believed that if you took the nameplates off the sweaters, the team would still play the same. That belief would turn the Mickey Mouse echo into fuel, and from that fuel, a machine would form, quiet, deliberate, and built to last. The architect arrives, Lou Lamoriello. The door didn't slam. It never does with Lou. He walked in with a folder, a few rules, and a way of speaking that made you lean in. No slogans, no promises, just standards. Lou Lamoriello came from college hockey, where clarity beats flash and habits beat hype. That fit New Jersey. A team that was tired of noise brought in someone who didn't raise his voice. Lou's background mattered less than his method. At Providence College, he'd built programs by aligning every layer: recruiting, development, daily discipline. He believed the smallest details stack into identity. When the Devils hired him as president and general manager, it wasn't for a clever trade or a splashy presser. It was for a blueprint. The thing is, he didn't talk about culture. He enforced it. Day one felt different. Haircuts neat, suits consistent, no facial hair. Media access tighter. The press noticed the edges, but the players felt the center. Time, place, standard. The rink became a quiet office with ice in the middle. Lou set expectations that were simple to understand and hard to dodge. You showed up on time, you practiced with tempo, you treated the logo like a contract. If you couldn't live with that, the door worked both ways. He had a philosophy of team-first anonymity that sounded harsh until you felt its purpose. He wanted a room where names faded and jobs sharpened, where the fourth line mattered because the first line trusted it. Take the nameplates off and the shifts should still look the same. That idea wasn't about stripping personality. It was about removing excuses. If the structure is the star, the team doesn't wobble when a star gets hurt. Early roster moves signaled the direction. He valued centers who could sort the middle, defensemen who could close space without panic, wingers who understood the wall game. Skill was welcome, but only if it sat inside the plan. He upgraded bottom six roles with players who didn't chase. He looked for defensemen who could make the first pass, then recover position. He sought goalies who calmed plays, not just stopped pucks. Each piece served the same thesis: reduce randomness. Lou's coaching hires told you where he was headed. Voices like Jacques Lemaire would arrive with a system-first lens, but even before that, the message tightened. Practice reps got shorter and cleaner. Video focused on lanes, layers, and support. Meanwhile, upstairs, Lou rewired the pipeline. Draft boards prioritized hockey sense, competitive maturity, and coachability. The thing is, you don't build a machine with rare parts. You build it with reliable ones. He changed how pressure felt. In the past, losing streaks triggered panic. Under Lou, they triggered process. Are the gaps tight? Are line changes crisp? Are we exiting on the strong side when the weak side isn't clean? He turned outcomes into diagnostics. That's calming. You don't yell at a malfunctioning engine, you tune it. And when players feel the fix is mechanical, not mystical, they lean in. Media called it controlling. From the inside, it felt like clarity. He didn't want stories about individuals. He wanted clean exits, short shifts. Lou's negotiations were firm. If you fit, he'd find a way. If you didn't, he moved on. He wasn't chasing the market. He was building a frame that could outlast it. He might pass on a high-scoring winger if the winger drifted in the neutral zone. He might invest in a defenseman the league called limited because the defenseman never lost his inside shoulder. He valued repeatable actions over sporadic brilliance, and there was accountability without spectacle. Fines happened, demotions happened, but so did trust. Players knew where they stood, and that steadiness drew veterans who wanted purpose more than headlines. The room got quieter, but not tense, disciplined. You could feel a shared rhythm: arrival, prep, skate, review. The building learned that rhythm too. Suddenly, the first period didn't sprawl, it stacked. What nobody outside knew yet was the plan's final form. Lou wasn't building a defensive team. He was building a territorial team. Control the middle, control the clock, control the risk. That would require a captain who could deliver contact like punctuation, and a goaltender who turned retrievals into clean plays. Those pieces were coming. For now, the foundation was the message. We are what we repeat. He kept circles small. Agents didn't leak much. Coaches aligned with the front office. Scouting fed the same language. The American League affiliate played a mirrored style, so call-ups didn't need translation. That continuity saved games in February and wins in April. It also saved players' energy. When roles are clear, you waste less juice deciding and more executing. From their perspective, fans saw something they could trust. Fewer end-to-end frolics, More games where a one-goal lead felt like a plan, not a cliff. The nickname that once trailed them started to feel out of date. It didn't vanish, it just lost oxygen. The team didn't clap back. They didn't need to. The table was being set for a system that would slow the league's rush and speed up New Jersey's decisions. The real insight is that Lou's arrival wasn't about charisma. It was about coherence. He took the scattered instincts from those early years and put them into lanes. He believed that if you take care of structure, identity takes care of itself. In New Jersey, that belief became policy. And once it did, the neutral zone, the old problem, was about to become the lever. Cornerstone acquired, Scott Stevens. The thing is, a system needs teeth. Lou had the frame, but he needed a presence who made the structure felt. Scott Stevens wasn't drafted by New Jersey. He arrived through compensation tied to a rare restricted free agent case. Messy, consequential, and defining. To understand why, we need to go back to 1991 and a rare kind of transaction. The St. Louis Blues signed Brendan Shanahan, a restricted free agent. Under the league's compensation process, St. Louis was ordered to send Scott Stevens to New Jersey as part of the settlement. One decision, one defenseman, and with it, New Jersey gained a captain-shaped cornerstone. There were protests, lawyers, noise, but the outcome held. Stevens belonged to the Devils. From their perspective, the room changed the day he walked in. He didn't have to talk much. The posture said enough. Shoulders square, eyes flat, skates that bit into the first drill like a check. He wasn't a cheerleader, he was a standard. The coaching staff didn't need to ask for buy-in, they could point to it. You don't drift when your captain's gap is perfect in September. Stevens' style matched the philosophy Lou was building. Control the middle. Close space hard and on time. Finish checks not to entertain, but to end plays. His hits were famous because they were clean, and they changed how forwards approached the blue line. Wingers started taking safer routes. Centers kept their heads on a swivel. That half-second of hesitation became real estate for New Jersey. But there was more than contact. He read the rink in layers. First read, kill the lane. Second read, recover inside. Third read, move the puck to the safest strong side option. That cadence synced with the coaching voice that was coming. It's one thing to install the neutral zone trap on a whiteboard. It's another to have a captain who turns it from theory into muscle memory at game speed. Stevens made goaltenders' nights calmer. Rush chances thinned. Screens got cleared without taking penalties. He'd seal sticks, box out early, and let shots come from the outside with clean sightlines. That's gold for a goalie. It also built trust with partners. Young defensemen could hold a tighter gap, knowing Stevens would sort the backside if a read got messy. Meanwhile, the locker room learned what accountability looked like without theatrics. If a forward floated on the back check, Stevens didn't need to bark. He'd just beat them to the defensive dots and make the play. That's a quiet message. Do your job, or someone else will. It wasn't about embarrassment, it was about alignment. You can't hide in a system built on layers. There were nights when his presence shifted series. In heavy playoff games, the ice narrows. That's when captains matter most. Stevens turned the middle of the rink into a toll booth. Opponents paid with time, position, or nerve. Coaches across the league started telling their defensemen to angle wide earlier against New Jersey because the center lane wasn't worth the collision risk. Here's where it gets practical. Stevens' pairings mattered. With a puck mover, he simplified exits. With a stay-at-home partner, he expanded his strike zone. Either way, the reads stayed honest. He didn't chase hits. He waited for the lane to close and delivered force within structure. That discipline kept penalties reasonable and minutes sustainable. Heavy minutes don't break you if your feet, stick, and shoulders do the work in the right order. He also carried the mental edge you need when a team's identity is called dull or negative. Criticism didn't change his stride. He seemed to draw energy from the idea that winning by controlling risk was somehow less worthy. The team followed that calm. You can play a low-event game with swagger if your captain treats every clearance as a crafted play, not a bailout. What nobody knew at the time was how often his presence would be the hinge in long springs. A blocked shot at the end of a 2-minute shift. A read that turns a neutral zone stand into a quick counter. A hit that changes how a star forward approaches the next shift. Those moments don't make highlight reels the way a rush goal does, but they tilt series. Fans felt it too. In the Meadowlands, a low murmur would start when an opponent cut through the middle with their head down. Not because people wanted carnage, but because they understood the economy of New Jersey's game. One well-timed stop in the neutral zone saved 3 in the defensive zone. Stevens turned that math into a nightly lesson. The real insight is that Stevens was the perfect captain for a system built on repetition. He gave it edge, clarity, and consequence. He wasn't louder than the plan, he made the plan louder. And with him in place, New Jersey had more than a blueprint. They had a cornerstone that held under pressure, shaped the room, and prepared the ice for a goaltender who would turn structure into a dynasty. Building the blueprint, the neutral zone trap. This was the moment everything changed. The middle of the ice stopped being a highway and became a checkpoint. Not by accident, and not because one coach drew a clever arrow on a board. It was a full team agreement. The Devils would win by owning the neutral zone, forcing decisions on their terms, and turning rushes into dumps, then dumps into clean exits. To understand why, we need to go back to how the trap works in plain terms. Think of the rink like a funnel. The Devils placed 3 layers across the neutral zone, led by a high forward angling from the puck side to the middle, steering carriers toward the boards. Behind him, the second forward read off that angle, closing the inside lane. The third forward mirrored the play on the weak side, ready to jump loose pucks. On defense, one held the blue line with a tight gap, while the partner floated a half step deeper, protecting against the long pass and odd man rush. 5 skaters, 1 picture. The stakes were simple. Give teams the neutral zone and you defend chaos. Take it away and you defend patterns. The Devils chose patterns. They didn't chase hits outside the lanes. They didn't overextend for steals. They cut ice in half, then cut it again. Action looked like this. Off an opposing breakout, the Devils' first forward skated a shallow C toward the carrier, stick in the passing lane, blade flat, forcing the puck wide. The second forward slid into the middle seam, ready to jump any inside feed. If the carrier chipped it past the first layer, the strong side defenseman met the puck early at the blue line with inside positioning, while the weak side defenseman hung back just enough to erase stretch plays. If the opponent dumped, Brodeur became the third defenseman, reading the rim, stopping it behind the net, and feeding the nearest safe option. 1 pass, 2 strides, and the puck exited under control instead of panic. Impact? It starved opponents of clean entries and rhythm. Rush chances shrank, shot quality dipped. The Devils didn't just defend less, they defended better when they had to. Meanwhile, their own offense started from order. With Brodeur springing exits and forwards already compact, New Jersey countered with numbers, not hope. The trap wasn't negative, it was selective aggression. Why was it perfectly suited to their personnel? Start with Scott Stevens. His gap control and timing made the blue line feel like a wall. He'd hold firm, trust the forward layer to steer the carrier, then finish with body or stick on puck. Pair him with a partner who respected spacing, and the back end formed a hinge that never broke. Add smart centers who could live in the middle of the rink, reading, reloading, arriving on time rather than gambling, and the layers held. Wingers who embraced the wall game completed it. Short support on retrievals, quick chips to space, and patience to change when the shift called for it. Here's where Brodeur transformed the blueprint. Most teams surrendered the extra pass after a dump. He didn't. He would stop the puck, turn his shoulders, and hit a defenseman or center with pace. That robbed opposing forechecks of oxygen. The trap forced dumps. Brodeur punished them. The league eventually changed rules about goalies wandering because New Jersey turned retrievals into exits with surgical regularity. That's not a side note. It's the engine's quiet hum. League reaction was immediate and loud. Critics said it slowed the sport. Coaches privately took notes. Teams tried to bully through the layers, then tried to outweight them, then tried to loft saucers over them. The thing is, the trap didn't require a perfect read to work. It required consistent reads. When 5 skaters saw the same picture, small errors didn't break plays, they bent them back into the plan. Stakes in big games got clearer. Protecting a 1-goal lead didn't feel like retreat, it felt like tilting. The Devils would get a lead, compress the middle, and make opponents skate extra miles for half chances. That wears on skill and patience. Meanwhile, New Jersey's counters arrived with timing. A forced dump here, a quick touch pass there, a line change that kept fresh legs in the lanes. Death by decisions. Action sequences turned on micro-choices. The first forward stick angle determined the entire shift's geometry. If it pointed outside the dot lane, the carrier had to accept the wall. If the second forward kept inside-out posture, the seam pass died. If the strong side defenseman stayed inside the dot line at the blue, the gap was strong without reaching. If any piece drifted, Stevens cleaned it. If a rim got past, Brodeur put a lid on it. 5 jobs, 1 language. Impact across a season was stark. Fewer odd-man rushes meant fewer desperation saves and fewer rebound scrambles. Penalties dropped because the Devils didn't lunge, they arrived. Fatigue shifted too. Skating in structure is efficient. You glide into lanes, you take 2 hard steps, then you angle. Opponents skated more north-south with less payoff. By March, that gap in energy mattered. Meanwhile, something else was happening tactically. The trap created offense in set pieces. Off a forced dump, New Jersey would run a 3-man exit, D to C, quick to the weak side wing, then hit the line with width. If the defense stepped, a chip behind became a retrieval race the Devils expected to win because their third forward was already reloading high. It looked conservative until the counter snapped. Selective pressure replaced end-to-end risk. What nobody knew at the time was how the trap would travel in the playoffs. Series slow down. Refs swallow whistles. The middle tightens by nature. New Jersey walked into that environment already fluent, while others tried to learn on the fly. Game after game, the Devils pulled opponents into the same conversation. Can you stay patient longer than we can? Most couldn't. Opponents adjusted. Some stacked too high in the neutral zone, trying to stretch the hinge. Others sent a weak side forward flying early to force the deeper Devils defenseman to retreat. New Jersey answered with tweaks. A quicker swing from the weak side forward to snuff the long pass, a half-step deeper gap on bad ice nights, and occasional surprise pressure from the high forward to steal a read and create a rush. The real insight is the trap wasn't a trick. It was a value system turned into spacing. Control risk, win the middle, make the other team do the hard thing again and again. With Stevens setting tone, Brodeur erasing dumps, and a roster built for discipline, the Devils didn't just adopt the trap, they refined it into a routine that held under playoff heat. And once the league saw it at full speed, the conversation about New Jersey shifted from jokes to problem-solving. The goaltending revolution, Martin Brodeur. The thing is, A system this tight asks a lot from the last line. Then New Jersey found a goalie who didn't feel like a last line at all. He felt like part of the five-man picture. Martin Brodeur didn't just stop pucks. He shortened shifts, changed routes, and turned dumps into decisions opponents learned to hate. To understand why he fit, go back to his development curve. Drafted and brought along without rush, he learned patience first. In the minors, he didn't chase saves, he read plays. Coaches in the organization taught the same language the big club spoke. Lanes, layers, safe options first. By the time he settled into New Jersey's net, his habits matched the Trap's timing. He didn't need the team to bend around him. He bent into the plan. What did he do that felt different? Start with the hands. Brodeur played the puck like a skater. He didn't just stop rims, he killed forechecks. On a dump, he'd beat the first forechecker to the corner, set his edges, and snap a pass to the weak side before that forechecker even got a stick in the lane. The defenseman stopped wearing the boards like a target. Retrievals felt like set plays, not coin flips. That's a huge mental lift in a league where one bad rim can turn into 2 minutes stuck deep. He also changed the angles shooters saw. Brodeur's stance sat relaxed, glove presented, blocker forward, feet light. Instead of living deep and relying on flares, he played a calm, narrow butterfly that let him recover fast. He trusted reads more than reach. If the shot came from the outside, he swallowed it or steered it to dead space. If it came from the slot, his feet set early because the Trap had already slowed the pass that created the chance. The system gave him time. He converted time into control. Then there's the economy of movement. Brodeur's game looked casual because it was efficient. He'd hold edge, slide a half pad, seal. No dramatic sprawl unless the play truly broke. That kept him fresh over long nights and long seasons. The team fed off that rhythm. When your goalie isn't flailing, you don't feel like you're one bounce from panic. You feel like you're one clean exit from tilting the ice again. Meanwhile, the league noticed the third defenseman effect. Forwards who used to fire chips with confidence started hesitating. Do you dump it to your strong side and let Brodeur stop it on his forehand? Do you try the soft lob to his backhand and risk a turnover in the slot because he pivots and threads a pass between forecheckers? That hesitation bought New Jersey's forwards an extra beat to reset structure. Brodeur put a clock in opponents' heads. He also took pride in small, boring plays. Late in periods, he'd rim a soft, high clear to the neutral zone instead of icing the puck, buying a clean change without a face-off. On penalty kills, he'd steer hard shots to predictable corners so his defensemen arrived first with their sticks pointed up ice. Those are micro-wins. Pile enough of them and the third period feels shorter for the team that's chasing. What about the mental piece? The Trap demands discipline, but it also demands quiet nerve from the goalie. You'll see fewer shots, but more of them will be high quality because they come after long stretches with nothing. That's a concentration test. Brodeur handled the lulls without drifting. He'd talk to his defenseman on whistles, trace the glass with his glove, keep the engine idling. When a backdoor play finally came, his feet were set like it was the first minute. The other shift he created was in practice culture. With a goalie that active, drills changed. Defensemen worked on bump backs and reverse options. Centers learned the timing of swinging low when Marty handled the puck. Wingers practiced reading his body language for a quick curl or a long chip. That meant game speed didn't surprise anyone. The system didn't just live in meetings, it lived in reps. There were rule ripples too. His range behind the net pushed the league toward the trapezoid years later, trying to corral goalie wanderers. That's impact beyond a stat line. But inside New Jersey's walls, the thing that mattered most was the trust loop. The skaters forced dumps. Brodeur neutralized them. Opponents tried riskier carries. The trap punished those. Each part fed the next. He wasn't flawless, and he didn't need to be. A soft goal didn't rattle the bench because his next 3 plays with the puck would erase a shift and a half of pressure. A breakaway against didn't feel like a breakdown of philosophy. It felt like a single test. He'd take the angle, show open ice, and close it late. Even on nights when rebounds popped, his defense knew where they'd land because his blocker and pads sent them to the same zones again and again. From their perspective, fans learned to exhale differently. A dump-in didn't mean chaos. It meant a small, rehearsed sequence you could almost call out from your seat. Stop, shoulder check, reverse, stride, outlet. The crowd started to anticipate exits instead of bracing for scrambles. That's a rare kind of calm in a sport built on momentum swings. The real insight is that Brodeur changed the role of the goalie by aligning it with territory, not just shot stopping. He turned the crease into a start point, not an end. In a system that valued control of the middle and control of risk, he added control of time. That's the third rail most teams never touched. New Jersey did, quietly, every night, and it made their machine hum. The near miss, 1994 Eastern Conference Final. Game 6 ended with a surge of red moving as one, the neutral zone compressed to a fist, and a series pushed to the edge. The Devils had dragged a louder franchise into a quiet kind of crisis. One more game, one more night to prove the machine could hold under New York lights. To understand how they got there, we need to go back to that spring's climb. The roster finally looked like the plan. Stevens was the spine. The forwards stacked their layers with a veteran calm. Brodeur, still young, played like he'd been in this system his entire life, stopping pucks, playing pucks, and turning forechecks into exits. Jacques Lemaire put the stamp on it. Games tightened. Leads felt like choices, not chances. The stakes were human. Across the river, the Rangers had pressure hanging from the rafters. Years of noise without a cup, a roster loaded with names, a city that measures patience in headlines. For New Jersey, it was simpler and heavier. Credibility. Beat the Rangers on this stage, and the Mickey Mouse echo finally goes quiet. Lose, and the system gets framed as almost good enough. Action rolled like a chess match played on skates. The Devils' first forward funneled, the second sealed seams, the strong side defenseman held the line without lunging. Brodeur handled dumps and pulled pucks off the end boards like routine chores. The Rangers punched back with skill layers of their own, using quick, low-to-high plays to try and force the Devils' structure to turn. Each shift felt like a test of nerve. Game 3 at the Meadowlands showed the plan at full speed. New Jersey closed the middle and countered with patience, taking goals where the ice allowed, not where the crowd wanted. You could feel the old building learn a new habit, cheering for a clean exit, humming through a long, disciplined change, rising on a rush that started from order. That's what a culture shift sounds like. Meanwhile, something else was happening. Brodeur's calm spread. He ate pucks with his chest, rolled rebounds into safe corners, and made the short pass that started the next controlled touch. When the Rangers tried to loft stretch plays, Stevens and his partner kept the hinge tight. It wasn't glamorous. It was exhausting to play against. You saw frustration in opponents' shoulders, not their quotes. Then came Game 7 at the Garden, one of those nights that explains why you build habits. The first period was about territory. New Jersey's gap was there, the lanes were there, and Brodeur set the tone by squaring early, forcing shots wide, and taking a few seconds off the clock with every clean handle. Stevens delivered a couple of checks that weren't statements so much as reminders. Not through here, not tonight. The Rangers found a lane off a broken bounce and nudged ahead. The Devils answered by staying inside themselves. No frantic stretch passes, no cheating above the puck. Third period, season on the line, they got the moment they earned. Late pressure, layered support, a puck recovered off a rim that Brodeur read early, and a shot that forced the building to swallow a gasp. Tie game. That's what patient hockey buys, a chance to be present in the 10th round. Overtime stretched like wire. Every dump was a negotiation with Brodeur's blade. Every entry was a dare against Stevens' timing. The bench lived shift to shift, not on slogans, but on the same small actions that got them there. Short changes, strong side exits, 3 across the line. The Rangers finally solved a seam, a puck found daylight, and it ended. One touch, one season, a near miss. The impact hit in layers. In the room, silence first. Then the clear, steady voice that had guided them all year. We're not changing. Not the system, not the standard. The loss didn't expose a flaw. It exposed how close the plan already was. The thing is, almost isn't empty when it's built on repeatable habits. Almost becomes tomorrow's certainty if you stay with it. From their perspective, fans felt both truths at once. It hurt, and it proved something. The Devils didn't wilt in the Garden. They brought their game to a rival's stage and made it live there for hours. Around the league, the conversation shifted. Analysts who'd called the trap a gimmick had to explain why it worked when fatigue and nerves usually break schemes. Coaches took notes they'd pretend not to take. For Stevens, it clarified the edge he'd carry into the next spring. Finish through hands, stay inside lanes, set tone early so the third period arrives on your terms. For Brodeur, it hardened the quiet he'd need when playoff minutes stretch and shots come in clusters. For Lemaire and Lou, it sealed the blueprint. No side quests. Draft for hockey sense, condition for pace, rehearse the same exits until they're boring. In the aftermath, that near miss became a hinge. The Devils learned how playoff patience feels when it's working, and how a single bounce can't be your map. They didn't chase a scorer to soothe the sting. They doubled down on identity. 12 months later, the league would see what that kind of discipline does over 4 rounds. The Garden night didn't break them, it tuned them. The breakthrough, 1995 Stanley Cup. The season started late and strange. A lockout carved months off the calendar and turned the league into a sprint. For New Jersey, that pace fit the plan. Short runway, tight schedule, travel compressed. Structure beats shine in those conditions. When the puck finally dropped in January, the Devils didn't need to find themselves. They just needed reps. The trap was already muscle memory. The captain's tone was set. The goalie's touches were a language. The thing is, short seasons punish improvisers and reward routines. Games stack without long gaps for course corrections. New Jersey lived inside a template that didn't care about headlines. 1-goal nights, 2-goal nights, nothing wasted. Lou's roster looked unshaken by the weight. Lemaire's detail held. Stevens played minutes like a metronome. Partners slotted in with clear reads, and Brodeur handled the puck as if the lockout hadn't interrupted a single rhythm. The standings didn't scare anyone yet because the year felt odd across the league. But inside New Jersey's room, the checklist sharpened. Zone exits on 2 touches, middle sealed, discipline with the lead. They didn't chase the President's Trophy, they chased habits. When the playoffs arrived, they were unglamorous and completely ready. Round 1 set the tone. New Jersey compressed the rink and suffocated mistakes. Opponents tried to turn games into rush exchanges. The Devils turned them into territorial drills. Every dump was a tax. Brodeur collected, Stevens enforced. The third period became an incline only New Jersey seemed trained to climb. Series pressure hits different when your identity is built for late shifts and tight scores. While that was happening, the league's louder teams looked for rhythm. The Devils just ran theirs. In round 2, the margins got thinner and the message got clearer. New Jersey didn't need 5 chances to score. They needed one clean look sprung from order. A forced dump, a Brodeur stop, a strong side bump to the center, and a wing out with speed. Goal. You could hear the Meadowlands learn to anticipate the pass before the cheer. The conference final was heavy. That's where the system's economy showed. The Devils spent less energy chasing because they didn't chase. They angled, arrived, and recycled pressure. Opponents took wider routes to avoid the middle, which meant more miles for less payoff. New Jersey's counters landed when legs were tired and minds were impatient. Brodeur's puck touches felt like a time machine. Take 10 seconds off the clock here, steal a change there. Then came Detroit. On paper, the Red Wings were a full orchestra. Skill lines. Names stacked 3 deep. The matchup looked like a clash of styles, but it wasn't. It was a test of who could make the other play their game longer. Game 1 in Detroit flipped expectations fast. New Jersey didn't sit back. They owned the middle, cut Detroit's east-west plays, and turned turnovers into blunt chances. The trap didn't stifle offense, it selected it. The Devils won, and the building in Michigan sounded surprised. Game 2 showed the trap's second gear. Detroit pushed pace to break the layers, stretching the weak side and feeding low-high quickly. New Jersey answered by tightening the hinge a half step and trusting Brodeur even more with rims. He diffused dumps, hit the weak side with pace, and the Devils exited clean under pressure. Stevens's timing at the line removed passing options like switches flipping off. Another win. The series tilted without noise. Back in the Meadowlands for Game 3, the crowd settled into that low hum that comes when a building knows its team. The Devils played the exact game they wanted. Short shifts, clean changes, neutral zone like a turnstile that took exact fare. Detroit's stars still created looks, but they arrived through effort, not flow. Brodeur's saves were simple because shots came from where New Jersey wanted them. A bounce here, a tip there, New Jersey up 3 games. Game 4 became a clinic in closing, not flashy, final. The Devils scored early off a turnover forced in the middle lane, then smothered routes for 50 minutes. You could see Detroit trying the third idea on the same shift, searching for a seam that wasn't there. The trap compressed their decision tree to 2 options. Both led to Brodeur's hands or the glass. The horn sounded. Sweep. A cup in a shortened season, not as a quirk, but as validation. The impact hit instantly. The style many called boring had just run through the league's best. Players on other teams admitted the fatigue the trap created. Coaches stopped rolling their eyes in public and started drawing the lanes in private. Analysts argued, but the scores settled it. New Jersey's way wasn't a loophole. It was a philosophy executed without ego. Inside the room, it meant something simple and profound. The near miss in '94 hardened into proof. Stevens lifted the cup, not with a grin, but with the steady face of a captain who knew the plan worked. Brodeur's reputation shifted from rising to pillar. Lemaire's system went from theory to trophy. Lou's insistence on identity felt less like control and more like care. Care for standards, care for details, care for winning that travels. From their perspective, Devils fans finally got a night where the quiet paid out loud. The Meadowlands, often measured in murmurs, roared with recognition. This was their kind of hockey. Workmanlike, disciplined, unpretentious, effective. The cup didn't erase the old nickname, it made it irrelevant. The thing is, they didn't win despite the trap. They won because they trusted it when the lights got hot. And the league? It adjusted the conversation. If you wanted to beat New Jersey now, you couldn't just be skilled. You had to be patient, conditioned, and humble enough to play a low-event game without blinking. Many weren't. The Devils had turned the middle of the rink into the center of the sport. Quietly, precisely, like a machine built for June. The aftermath. Champions no one wanted to celebrate. The parade felt smaller than the moment. There was joy, sure, but it came with a shrug from the wider hockey world. The thing is, New Jersey had just run a clinic, and a lot of people didn't like the lesson. The narrative landed fast. The Devils were bad for hockey. Not because they broke rules, but because they bent rhythm. Low scores, low chances, low chaos, high control. While that was happening on talk shows and in columns, the room stayed calm. They'd heard the knocks all year. The cup didn't change the music outside, it turned it up. Critics said the trap strangled creativity. Players in New Jersey heard something else. We made you play uncomfortable. The Devils' answer wasn't to argue, it was to rehearse. The plan travels, noise doesn't. From their perspective, the resentment felt strange. Most champions are copied. This one was scolded. In other markets, a title sparks imitations. With New Jersey, it sparked think pieces about aesthetics. Opponents talked about clogged middles like it was a moral failing. Coaches complained about holding as if structure itself were a foul. The league debated how much a system should be allowed to shape tempo. The irony was simple. The Devils didn't slow the game. They sped up decisions. Inside the organization, the criticism became fuel. Lou didn't ask players to clap back. He asked them to double down. Less talk, cleaner tape. The message sharpened. If you want applause, join a band. If you want rings, play our song. Practice tempo stayed high, details tighter. Lemaire's tweaks got quieter, more surgical. Small bumps to forecheck triggers, quicker reads on the weak side, the same framework refined a click at a time. Meanwhile, fans in New Jersey developed a knowing smile. They'd sit in that bowl in the Meadowlands and cheer a perfect neutral zone stand like other crowds cheer a breakaway. They understood the economy of it. Every forced dump was a small win. Every Brodeur handle was a second stolen. Every Stevens step-up was a lane closed without a penalty. Around the country, people booed the trap. In Jersey, they applauded habits. The bad for hockey tag stuck to broadcasts. Analysts said it out loud. The thing is, it missed the human part. The Devils weren't trying to erase flair, they were trying to win when legs were heavy and clocks were short. That's playoff reality. Ask any veteran. The third period of a one-goal game isn't a talent show. It's about who blinks. New Jersey trained not to blink. There was another layer. Respect whispered, not shouted. Players on opposing teams started telling reporters off the record that the Devils were the hardest out. Not the scariest shift, the hardest series. You didn't get freebies. You didn't get flow. You had to accept that your best looks would come from places they could live with, and that patience was your only path. That's not bad for hockey. That's advanced hockey. The league's response came in meetings and memos. Officiating points of emphasis were discussed. Obstruction was defined and redefined. Years later, rules would shift, and the trapezoid would show up behind nets, an indirect nod to how Brodeur turned retrievals into exits. But in the immediate aftermath, New Jersey didn't change what it believed. They cleaned up what officials watched and kept the middle theirs. Inside the room, the identity hardened. Us against the script. Us against the impatience of the sport. It wasn't angry. It was resolved. Veterans reminded young players that outside praise is weather, inside standards are climate. That line sounds neat, but it lived in simple things. Finishing checks through hands, changing on time, taking the safe chip with a lead, and living to stack another good shift. Micro-stories captured the new posture. A winger took a hit to chip a puck out, instead of trying a cute play at the blue line. No celebration, just a nod from Stevens. A centre skated past the empty net, late to kill extra seconds on the clock because the 2-goal cushion wasn't an invitation to pad stats. It was a chance to end a night clean. A defenseman rimmed soft to the weak side because he trusted Brodeur's handle more than his own tired legs. Meanwhile, other teams experimented. Some tried to mirror the trap and found out it's not a sweater you borrow for a weekend. It's a lifestyle. Without the daily buy-in, forward sticks flat, defense gaps honest, goalie calm with the puck, it breaks. New Jersey watched those copies falter and kept their version simple. 5 skaters, 1 picture. The quietest impact was on development. The AHL affiliate taught the same rhythm. Prospects learned to love a 2-1 win. They were told the point wasn't to be noticed, it was to be trusted. That's a different carrot. It produced role players who could live in heavy minutes without craving a headline. Let's be honest, the applause never matched the achievement. That was fine. The Devils weren't a show, they were a machine. And in the season after the Cup, when critics wanted contrition or reinvention, New Jersey offered neither. They offered proof that their way wasn't a phase, it was a flaw. The rest of the league could debate the look. The Devils were busy refining the feel. Evolving the system, tweaks and adjustments. The thing is, dominance fades if it stays static. After 95, opponents adjusted. Coaches stacked the weak side to stretch the hinge. Skilled teams dragged defensemen laterally with low to high switches. Speed lines tried early chips behind the strong side D to force deeper gaps. New Jersey answered with tweaks that didn't betray the core. The trap stayed, but the timing and the layers got smarter. First, they changed the first forward's angle by inches, not yards. Instead of a pure funnel to the wall, the F1 path started half a step more inside out. That stole the middle without opening the far seam. It sounds small, it changed everything. Carriers felt pinched earlier, which killed those late slip passes that had crept in. F2 mirrored tighter, reading stick blades rather than hips for quicker jumps. F3 lifted a touch higher to erase stretch ideas before they formed. Same picture, sharper edges. Second, they diversified exits. Early trap years lived on strong side bumps and short chips. As forechecks cheated on those reads, Brodeur and the defense added a reverse and bump back sequence that looked like a mistake until it wasn't. Marty would sell the rim, shoulder check, then float a soft reverse into a preset pocket. The weak side D arrived already opening up, the center swung low, and the whole group left with pace. When teams tried to pin that pocket, the Devils added a third option. A quick high flip to neutral ice where a forward timing off the boards could win a foot race without losing shape. Meanwhile, something else evolved, the pinch rules. New Jersey's defensemen had always guarded the line with inside body. Now, with more teams running 3-man weaves at entries, the Devils installed a green-yellow-red read. Green. Step early if F3 is high and the back pressure is honest. Yellow. Hold inside the dots and force the slow dump. Red. Retreat a half step and trust Brodeur to kill the rim. That color code lived in practice. It turned frantic split-second choices into shared, repeatable decisions. Opponents started running delay entries, curling to buy time for trailers. The Devils' counter was a polished reload over pursue mantra. Instead of chasing the curler, F2 pivoted to cut the trailer lane. F3 skated downhill into the high slot, and the strong side D held inside the dots. Delay plays died into the boards. When rivals responded with east-west seam hunts, Stevens and partners squeezed spacing. Sticks active, shoulders quiet, eyes on the far dot. Seam passes arrived to flat blades, not open space. They also layered a little more offense without betraying the core. Under Larry Robinson and later Pat Burns, the weak side D got a green light to walk the blue in controlled pockets, never at the cost of the hinge. The high forward covered instinctively, making it a 3-high umbrella for 10 seconds, then snapping back into the trap on any change of possession. That tiny window unlocked low slot tips and rebound chaos that the earlier, more conservative version rarely produced. Face-off plays got cleaner. On O-zone wins, they'd run a low cycle to pull coverage under the dots, then kick high for a quick through-traffic look. On D-zone losses, the set was brutally simple. Rim safe first, chip second, fight third, because the first two worked so often. And on neutral zone draws, they leaned into win it back, chip to speed, a call that looked like nothing to the crowd but put defensemen in motion at the exact right time. Conditioning caught up league-wide, so New Jersey tweaked shift length. Slightly shorter, more frequent changes kept the 5-man picture consistent, especially on the road. You started to see line changes that looked choreographed. Puck to a safe quadrant, 3 steps to the bench, fresh legs sliding into the lanes mid-rush without a seam opening. That's a skill. They practiced it like a breakout. Anyway, moving past the mechanics, the mindset evolved too. Players were told to hunt moments, not numbers. If a forecheck read screamed pressure, they went, hard, together, then back on a rope. If it didn't, they let the game come to them. That ebb and flow made the trap feel less like a break and more like a clutch. It allowed a push without losing shape. What nobody outside fully appreciated was how much communication tightened. One-word calls, bump, wheel, high, hold, cut through noise. Brodeur's voice set routes. Stevens's stick set lanes. Wingers owned the walls without puck panic. Centers lived in the middle like traffic cops, steering, not chasing. The silhouette stayed the same, the reflexes got quicker. The real insight is the Devils didn't defend change, they absorbed it. They kept the spine, sharpened the reads, and added just enough bite to score on their terms. When the league tried to solve them, they edited the sentence, not the paragraph. And the machine kept humming. The second wave, developing complementary talent. The thing is, a machine like this doesn't run on stars alone. After the Cup, New Jersey shifted focus to the parts that make the whole work under stress. Complementary players who fit the reads, the rhythm, and the restraint. Drafting and development turned into talent translation. Can this player process fast, accept a smaller box on the whiteboard, and still make winning plays? Lou's board leaned toward hockey sense and competitive maturity. Scouts were told to watch between the touches, line changes, support routes, wall trust. If a winger won his battle and still got back above the puck on time, that meant more here than an extra rush goal in junior. Centers had to sort traffic, not chase it. Defensemen needed first-pass calm and inside shoulder pride. It wasn't flashy criteria, but it fed the core. Meanwhile, the farm became an echo. In Albany, the system wasn't a watered-down copy, it was a mirror. Coaches taught the same exits, the same reload rules, the same neutral zone spacing. Prospects didn't get called up to learn, they got called up to execute. That pipeline mattered when injuries hit in February and when series tightened in May. A left wing from the AHL could walk into a third-line role and know the 3 words that kept the shift alive. Bump, high, hold. Role players turned into specialists by design. A right-shot center who won draws on his weak side suddenly became the first shift after an icing. A winger with a heavy stick and no panic on the wall became the closer with a lead. A defenseman who didn't score much but never lost body position at the net front, got 20 minutes on nights when tips and rebounds wrote the script. These weren't plug-ins, they were purpose-built parts. Here's where Lou found value others missed. Players labelled limited because they didn't carry the puck much thrived when the job was to kill plays and start the safe touch. Forwards who'd bounced around elsewhere found new life as penalty killers because New Jersey treated the kill like a microcosm of the trap. Angles first, then sticks, then clears. Defensemen with average feet but perfect reads became trusted because perfect reads arrive on time. Analytically, before analytics got loud, the Devils leaned on repeatable events. Defensive zone exits completed with control. Entries allowed without control. Net front box-outs won. Shift lengths under 40 seconds. Those were tracked in notebooks and in coaches' heads. If a prospect's game produced those numbers, he moved up the list. If he chased the extra deke at a blue line, he moved down. The message was clear. Make the next person's job easier. From their perspective, role players felt seen. A fourth liner who took a hit to chip a puck out got the same quiet nod as a first liner who finished a rush. The captain's standard didn't discriminate. Coaches rolled lines with intent, not ceremony. You'd see a third line take a D-zone start with a minute left in a period because they trusted the picture more than the pedigree. That kind of trust keeps a room honest. Micro-stories told the arc. A young defenseman came up, played 6 low-event minutes, and earned 8 the next night because not a single puck died on his stick below the dots. A winger was told his job was simply to be first on the forecheck, finish through hands, and change hard. He did it and found himself starting every period until the series ended. A center learned to tie up sticks on defensive zone draws instead of trying to win them clean. The second effort won the lane, and the bench noticed. The pipeline of defensive defensemen became a quiet trademark. Not monstrous hits, those were Stevens's notes, but posture. Knees bent, stick in the seam, hands soft, feet patient. One pairing would eat tough minutes, another would be the calm that made Brodeur's reads simple. The thing is, when your third pair understands spacing, your second pair can grab a safer inch at the line, and your first pair can dictate. Layers on layers. Micro-stories told the arc. A young defenseman came up, played 6 low-event minutes, and earned 8 the next night because not a single puck died on his stick below the dots. A winger was told his job was simply to be first on the forecheck, finish through hands, and change hard. He did it and found himself starting every period until the series ended. A center learned to tie up sticks on defensive zone draws instead of trying to win them clean. The second effort won the lane, and the bench noticed. The pipeline of defensive defensemen became a quiet trademark. Not monstrous hits, those were Stevens' notes, but posture. Knees bent, stick in the seam, hands soft, feet patient. One pairing would eat tough minutes, another would be the calm that made Brodeur's reads simple. The thing is, when your third pair understands spacing, your second pair can grab a safer inch at the line, and your first pair can dictate. Layers on layers. Value signings worked because the asks were clear. A veteran forward would come in on a 1-year deal and be told, kill penalties, trust the glass on bad ice, don't pinch the wall unless F3 is high. Simplicity travels. He'd leave with a career extended by being part of wins instead of chasing points on a team without an identity. That reputation brought the right kind of pros to New Jersey on smart tickets. The captain's legacy, Stevens' leadership. The thing is, leadership in a room like New Jersey's wasn't about speeches, it was about posture. Scott Stevens embodied the culture Lou and the coaches built because he moved through it with zero friction. He showed up early, skated hard in the first drill, hit clean in the second, and set gaps in the third. By the time the first meeting ended, the message was already taught on the ice. He carried authority without chasing it. If practice tempo dipped, he didn't lecture. He cut a rep short by stepping into the lane and finishing a play with contact that said, "Wake up." If a drill got sloppy, he'd reset the line himself and run it again, same pattern, same pace, until the picture looked like New Jersey hockey. The room followed because he didn't perform discipline. He lived it. With younger players, Stevens simplified pressure. He'd pull a defenseman aside and talk in quiet, specific terms. Inside shoulder, short stick, eyes first. Then he'd skate that player's next rep at half speed, hands in the right spot, feet under him, and let the muscle memory set. That's mentorship you can feel. It turns anxiety into a task. It also turns prospects into trustworthy minutes by spring. He led in the way shifts ended. If a change needed to happen at the red line, he took an extra stride to buy the bench an easier window. If an exit called for the glass instead of a stretch pass, he trusted the glass. That might sound small. It's the difference between drama and calm. The players behind him made fewer hard stops because he made fewer desperate reads. In heavy games, the leadership got physical and precise. He didn't chase hits to spark emotion. He timed hits to end routes. A winger cutting middle with the puck on his forehand met the shoulder that turned a rush into a reset. The crowd reacted to the collision. The bench reacted to the possession change. That's how a captain teaches what matters without saying a word. Meanwhile, he handled criticism of the team's style with a shrug that steadied everyone else. Asked about boring hockey, he'd nod and offer a short answer about details, then lace up and play the same low-event clinic. The point wasn't to win a debate, it was to keep the blueprint intact. Players take cues from that restraint. When the captain doesn't fidget, nobody fidgets. Stevens' presence gave partners range. With a young puck mover, he played the adult in the room, backing him up, closing lanes early, and talking through reads on whistles. With a stay-at-home partner, he expanded, stepping up at the line more often because the second layer stayed honest. Either way, he removed panic. Panic is expensive in May. He saved those minutes, shift by shift. He also treated penalties like a trust test. If a call went against them, he reset the bench. Short shifts, sticks down, let Brodeur see the puck. He'd win the first net front wrestle legally, hands inside, hips low, because winning the first wrestle often wins the minute. The kill felt like a continuation of 5-on-5 values, not a separate world. That kept their identity intact under stress. From their perspective, forwards learned the economy of his decisions. Track back through the middle, not the boards. Arrive, don't chase. Finish through hands, not through chests, and be ready to stop on the defensive dots. When a winger did it right, Stevens didn't high-five. He met eyes for a beat and moved on. That tiny acknowledgement lasted longer than a speech. He had a playoff gear that wasn't louder, just sharper. First period set tone, tight gaps at the line, safe first touches, no hero plays at either blue. He absorbed the opponent's first push without trying to answer in one shift. That patience freed the bench to trust the slow crush the Devils preferred. You win long series by winning the boring minutes. He made those minutes feel like home. The real insight is that Stevens fused identity and consequence. If you strayed from structure, your next view was his back, finishing the job you skipped. If you lived within it, you got the calm that comes from a captain who never blinked. He didn't make the system famous, he made it honest. And honesty, in New Jersey's world, was the quiet edge that turned patience into rings. The 2000 Stanley Cup, perfecting the formula. By 2000, the silhouette looked the same, 5 skaters, 1 picture, but the edges were sharper. The roster had evolved from 95's blunt control into something more layered. The thing is, the Devils could still suffocate you, but now they could press the gas for 10 minutes and flip a game without breaking the frame. That balance defined the run. The season told on-ice truth. Jacques Lemaire had passed the bench to Robbie Ftorek, and later Larry Robinson steadied the ship. The coaching voices differed, but the core language stayed intact. Under Robinson in the spring, timing cleaned up, pairings settled, and the group moved with a quiet certainty. They could toggle between patience and pressure mid-shift. That's rare. On the back end, Stevens was still the spine, but the blue line now moved the puck cleaner. Partners with calm first passes turned exits into planned sprints. The hinge held like always, inside the dots, stick first, body next. But when the Devils won a retrieval, the first pass hit a stride instead of a skate blade. That small upgrade paid off in counters that arrived sooner and with better spacing. Up front, centermen who processed fast became the team's control tower. They lived in the middle lane, sorted back pressure, and kept F3 honest without killing chances. Wingers read the wall game with more nuance. Sometimes the glass, sometimes a bump to the middle, sometimes a soft area chip that looked conservative but invited speed underneath. Nothing flashy, everything intentional. And then there was the push line. When New Jersey decided to tilt the ice, they could. They'd double up shifts in short bursts, layer a second wave on a tired defense pair, and attack off the exact exits they practiced all year. The trap didn't disappear. It breathed. You felt it in second periods when benches were long and legs got heavy. The playoffs opened with the same low-drama posture. Take what the ice gives, give nothing in return. Early rounds reaffirmed the economy. Few odd-man rushes allowed, Brodeur eating pucks with clean sightlines, and the Devils banking goals off set counters. The penalty kill mirrored 5-on-5 habits. Stick angles, lanes, clears that were passes in disguise. Each special team's minute still felt like New Jersey's terms. Then came Philadelphia in the conference final, a test of will and patience. The series went deep, and the hole was real. Down 3-1, the Devils didn't change character, they narrowed it. Shift length shortened. Exits simplified. Stevens set tone early in periods with body that closed routes, not just delivered noise. Brodeur made the right kind of hard saves, quiet ones at the end of long cycles where panic usually creeps in. The bench gained inches, then feet, then games. Game 7 in Philly became a study in timing. New Jersey's reads were crisp. F1's angle stole the middle, F2 smothered the seam, the strong side D held inside dots and never lunged. When the chance arrived, it came off script. A forced dump, a Brodeur touch, a controlled exit, and a clean look finished with the kind of composure a patient team earns. That comeback wasn't magic. It was accumulation. Dallas in the final brought a champion's poise and a great goalie across the ice. The series lived in hard areas, net front, corners, the slot. The Devils' formula held because it flexed. They mixed cycle pressure with scheduled restraint. 2 hard shifts to push, 1 calm shift to reset the picture. Stevens turned the middle into a toll road again. Partners matched his posture and let Brodeur see what he needed. Brodeur's value went beyond saves. In a series where space was scarce, his touches behind the net stole seconds and spoiled forechecks. On nights when Dallas tried to outweight the trap with long possessions, Marty's first outlet accuracy trimmed fatigue. The thing is, late in games, that energy margin decides who makes the last clean play. Larry Robinson's bench had a gentle hand. He didn't chase mismatches, he preserved structure. Lines rolled with trust, which meant role players got their minutes in heavy spots. D-zone draws after icings, late period kills, early period pushes. The room responded. Everyone knew the ask. Everyone repeated it. Stevens' leadership showed in details. Early in games, he managed risk. Safe first touch, no stretch through standing sticks, a finish that sent a message without inviting whistles. Late, he expanded range at the line, stepping when F3 was high, sitting when reads turned yellow. His discipline kept the series from devolving into coin flips. Up front, the Devils' ability to create one good look per period mattered. They didn't flood the net with weak chances. They waited for a misread, a tired stick, a defender a half-step late on a switch, and they attacked. That patience can feel passive if you don't understand the work underneath. Reloads, short supports, the third man high. In New Jersey, it was planned. Overtime in the Cup final distilled the era's tension. Every rim was a negotiation with Brodeur. Every entry was a bet against the hinge. The winning plays came from habits. A retrieval won because body position was taught. A puck moved quickly because the first read was owned. A shot taken through a screen because the high man covered. No magic words, just the same quiet choices, stacked. When the handshake line ended and the cup rose again, it felt different than '95. This wasn't validation, it was refinement. The Devils showed they could perfect their formula without calcifying. They added a gear, trusted a deeper bench, and proved their structure could handle adversity without losing its shape. The league kept debating aesthetics. New Jersey kept mastering margins. The real insight is that dominance here wasn't volume, it was precision under pressure. In 200, the machine didn't just run, it tuned itself mid-series, mid-shift, and found the winning play in the smallest available space. That's how quiet becomes inevitable. The third cup, 2003, and sustained excellence. The thing is, by 2003, New Jersey's identity had outlived the noise. Coaches had changed, rules were nudged, rosters turned over at the edges, and the silhouette held. This run wasn't about surprising anyone. It was about proving, again, that the machine travels. Different year, same calm. Different matchups, same middle of the ice. The regular season set the stage with a familiar rhythm. Low event control, a defense that protected the dots, and Brodeur's hands turning dumps into choices opponents regretted. Pat Burns steadied the bench with a hard, clear voice that fit the room. Details first, ego last. Under him, the Devils looked like a veteran team that didn't need to manufacture drama. They skated their standard, shift after shift, waiting for the series moments when patience cashes out. Round 1 showed the baseline. New Jersey leaned on structure, letting opponents skate east-west and then eat the wall. Brodeur took care of the routine so the blue line could own the hard. Stevens' timing set tone, clean at the line, heavy when needed, never chasing a hit for the highlight. The trap didn't suffocate in April, it clarified. You could see it in how quickly entries died and how rarely the Devils got pulled into track meets. Round 2, the ice got heavy, the games tighter. New Jersey's edge came from the third and fourth lines, repeating the plan. They owned D-zone shifts after icings, accepted short chips as success, and changed like clockwork. The penalty kill mirrored 5-on-5 posture. Sticks flat, lanes owned, clears to pressure points instead of blind heaves. It wasn't flashy. It stacked minutes New Jersey liked. Against Tampa's speed and skill, the hinge mattered. Opponents tried to stretch the weak side with long passes. The Devils answered by lifting F3 a step and asking their strong side D to win the inside dots with quiet feet. The result was predictable. Fewer clean looks, more dumps, more Brodeur touches that shortened shifts. When New Jersey pushed, it came off planned triggers, a one retrieval, a center swing, a weak side slash at the line. One chance was enough on most nights because the game stayed on their terms. The conference final against Ottawa was the test. President's Trophy, deep roster, a team built to skate. The series swung on inches and nerve. Early, New Jersey's neutral zone layers blunted Ottawa's rush rhythm. The Senators adjusted with curlbacks and trailers. The Devils countered by prioritizing reloads over pressure. F2 didn't chase the curler, he sealed the slot. F3 lived high, taking away the late threat. It turned pretty entries into perimeter play. Game 7 in Ottawa set a tone that felt vintage and current at once. Stevens handled the middle with that calm that never aged. Early contact through hands, firm gap at the line, no panic on first touches. Brodeur's best saves were quiet, the kind that smother a rebound before any chaos can grow. The winning push came late, created by layers doing the same thing again. A forced dump, a clean stop, a two-touch exit, and a finish with poise. The bench didn't explode, it exhaled. That's the difference when a team trusts its shape. Then came Anaheim and the finals goaltending duel. The series lived on the crease edges. New Jersey kept traffic honest in front of their net, hands inside, hips low, eyes on sticks, so Brodeur could own first shots. At the other end, patience stayed the play. The Devils didn't fling pucks from bad angles just to feel busy. They worked below the dots, kicked high at the right time, and hunted deflections through layered screens. The trap still mattered here because it protected energy. In long, greedy games, the team that wastes the fewest strides makes the last clean play. Pat Burns's bench choices matched the moment. He didn't chase names, he chased fits. Defensive zone draws went to lines that lived for them. Offensive zone chances went to hands that didn't panic under pressure. The message stayed simple: win your 40-second world. The staff trusted role players, and those players returned that trust with honest shifts. That integrity kept the group from fraying when the series swung back and forth. Stevens's leadership was felt in the quiet edges. No hero passes at either blue, no retaliation when games tried to get chippy, and no drift above the puck late in periods. He set the margin for error and lived inside it. Partners matched him. Forwards took their cue and got above pucks earlier, which meant counters started from order, not scrambles. That's how a room absorbs stress without chewing through itself. Brodeur's influence stretched beyond saves. His puck handling shaved off minutes of zone time across the series. On bad ice nights, he simplified. Hard rims to safe corners, shoulder checks, the high flip when needed. On clean ice, he threaded the weak side outlet that teams still struggled to take away without breaking their forecheck. Those touches are energy management. They add up to fresher legs for the 5 shifts that decide a cup. Winning Game 7 at home felt like a thesis defense. The Devils didn't reinvent anything. They ran the blueprint, toggled pressure when the reads were green, and shrank the night to decisions they controlled. When the horn sounded and the cup crossed the ice to Stevens, you could trace a line back to 95 and even to the near miss in 94. Same spine, same truth. Control isn't a mood, it's a method. The real insight is that 2003 proved sustainability. 2 different decades, coaching voices shifted, league speed up, and the Devils still made June bend toward them. That's not nostalgia. That's a culture that teaches spacing, patience, and consequence so well that new parts behave like old parts. Quiet dominance isn't an accident. It's a habit that survives change. Brodeur's record-breaking career. The thing is, records never felt like Brodeur's goal. They were byproducts of a routine that matched the Devils' rhythm. Night after night, he read the same lanes, touched the puck the same way, and stacked minutes that didn't leak energy. Over years, that steady pulse wrote his name all over the record book. Start with the volume that mattered. Wins. The Devils' system cut rushes and structured chances, but someone still had to close the door. Brodeur did, with a pace that looked casual until you tried to match it. He didn't chase highlight saves. He arrived early and made clean ones. That economy kept him fresh across seasons where other goalies burned hot, then dimmed. New Jersey's low-event design, combined with his control, gave him more nights with the game in his hands and fewer with it hanging by a thread. Wins followed, quietly, relentlessly. Shutouts told the same story. The trap funneled shots to lanes he could see. He took away those first looks, smothered rebounds into predictable corners, and managed the clock with his puck handling. A typical Brodeur shutout didn't feel like a siege. It felt like a series of small, tidy moments. A stick steer here, a glove that didn't pop rebounds there, a touch behind the net that turned a possible cycle into an exit. Stack those moments for 60 minutes, and zero appears on the board without fanfare. His workload was unique. Long stretches with little to do, then a slot chance that demanded instant sharpness. That concentration test is where many goalies drift. Brodeur built rituals that kept the engine warm. Talk on whistles, scan the glass, soft taps on posts, quick shoulder checks before face-offs. When the one-timer finally came from the dot, he was set like it was the first shot of the night. That's not talent alone, that's preparation aligned with a team that prized patience. Meanwhile, his puck handling inflated value beyond saves. Wins and shutouts don't tell you how many forechecks he killed before they started. Every time he stopped a rim and snapped a pass to the weak side, he shaved time off the other team's push and set the Devils up for a line change on their terms. Over months, that spared legs. Over years, it spared seasons. That's how longevity happens in a league that grinds. Durability became its own column. He started and started and started. The thing is, New Jersey's structure protected him from chaos fatigue. Defensemen boxed out early, forwards owned the middle. He still faced high-quality looks, but not the wild, scrambling kind that twist hips and burn groins. Add his efficient style, short slides, controlled butterflies, edges held, and you get health that outlives eras. He didn't need to reinvent himself every summer. He refined the same movements until they were second nature. He broke marks that felt out of reach because his seasons didn't swing. Peaks were smooth, valleys shallow. When injuries hit the roster or coaching voices changed, his baseline held. That steadied the room. You walk in knowing your goalie's language and you play faster. That's how he accumulated, not with spikes, but with a floor that never dipped. The system enabled his unique style, and he returned the favor. Defensemen trusted reverse options because he saw forecheckers early. Centers timed their low swings off his shoulders. Wingers waited a beat longer on the wall because they knew the puck might arrive flat and on time. Those habits turned into design. What started as a goalie's skill became a team's identity, and the league noticed enough to draw lines behind nets to mute his range later on. Even with that constraint, the reads stayed. He adapted, quicker bumps, smarter flips, the same calm. Records need context, and his came against evolving shooters and tighter schedules. As pace rose, he didn't chase new trends for trends' sake. He added what fit: wider butterflies when traffic increased, harder seals on posts as wrap attempts multiplied, but never lost his anchor. Beat the pass with feet, present the hands, control the first touch. That clarity carried him past names on leaderboards and into his own tier. He also took pride in the unglamorous counts that never make graphics. Delay of game icings avoided by smart clears. Extra seconds bled off the penalty kill with precise rims. Neutral zone flips that landed softly enough to let a tired line change without a whistle. Those don't become plaques, but they become wins, and wins become numbers that stand. From their perspective, teammates felt his records as calm in tight nights. Down one late, they didn't panic because goals against rarely doubled without a mess of mistakes. Up one, they played the percentages, knowing their goalie didn't turn routine into drama. That mutual trust insulated slumps. It also made milestones feel shared. Every congratulation in the room sounded the same. We did our jobs, you did yours, and the total kept climbing. He wasn't just a product of the trap, he was a proof of concept. Put a high IQ, high-touch goalie behind a disciplined five-man picture, and the math tilts. Shot quality lowered. Time of possession shifted. Fatigue favored the team with exits. Over a decade plus, that tilt becomes history. You can argue styles, but you can't argue totals written in ink. The real insight is Brodeur's records read like a ledger of small, repeatable choices. The Devils gave him structure. He gave them time. Time turned into control. Control turned into wins and zeros. And those wins and zeros, stacked quietly across winters, became numbers that define an era. The era where the crease in New Jersey wasn't the end of the play, it was where their next one started. The Lamoriello method, front office philosophy. The thing is, culture doesn't live on a whiteboard. It lives in the choices you make when nobody's watching. Lou Lamoriello's method turned that idea into policy. He didn't sell slogans. He set standards, then built an organization where those standards were the easy choice every day. Start with clarity. Roles were defined before names were written on lines. If you were signed or drafted, you knew the job you were being asked to do. Centers sorted traffic. Wingers owned walls and back pressure. Defensemen valued first touch and inside position. Goalies were partners in exits, not just shot stoppers. That clarity let scouts align what they saw with what the team needed. It also filtered out noise. If a talented player didn't fit the job, the board didn't bend. Lou prized what travels. He leaned into hockey sense, conditioning, and accountability because those survive bus rides and back-to-backs. A flashy skill without the habits to protect it didn't move him. But a player who processed the next touch quickly, that was currency. Interviews focused on mindset. Will you accept a smaller box if it wins? Will you repeat a boring play in April if it keeps the room calm in May? If the answers hesitated, so did the interest. Communication was measured and strict. The external message stayed short. No grand reveals, no running commentary on plans. Internally, it was precise. Coaches spoke the same language at every level. The AHL mirrored the NHL. Prospects didn't step into surprises. They stepped into the same system with faster consequences. That alignment let call-ups look like they'd been there all year. The machine didn't hiccup when a piece changed. Contracts reflected identity. Lou didn't chase every market spike. He offered numbers that valued trust and longevity. If you wanted to be part of the standard, the team rewarded you with stability and a real chance to win. If you needed a bigger spotlight or looser rules, that was fine. It just probably wasn't New Jersey. That policy kept the cap, when it arrived, from strangling the room. Fewer outlier deals meant more room for the spine and the honest depth that supports it. Discipline wasn't cosmetic. Grooming rules became a symbol people liked to joke about, but the lesson ran deeper. Remove distractions, remove exceptions, remove the small frays that become big tears under stress. On time, in shape, prepared. When it's baked in, you don't burn energy policing it later. Players might roll their eyes once, then realize the time they used to spend negotiating boundaries now goes to detail. Draft tables under Lou often took the long view. If a prospect's path needed an extra year, that wasn't a problem. Rushing for headlines didn't fit the method. He preferred complete players over immediate contributors who needed the team to bend around them. The farm handled reps, the NHL handled results, and the bridge between them was trust. By the time a player arrived, the coaches weren't reinventing him. They were plugging him into a role he already knew. Trades were about fit, not splash. If a hole appeared, left-handed D who could keep the hinge honest, right-shot center who could win draws on his weak side, Lou targeted exactly that. No sugar rush of a name that didn't match the ask. And when the room needed a nudge, he added veterans with habits, not volume. A calm voice on a bench late in a series can be worth more than an extra move on a rush. Accountability ran both ways. The organization asked players to accept roles. The front office met them with consistency. If you did the small things, you kept your seat. If you drifted, no pedigree saved you. That fairness matters. It turns depth into believers and stars into stewards. Stevens embodied it on the ice. Lou institutionalized it off the ice. Scouting leaned heavy on rinkside truths. Numbers mattered as they emerged, but the Devils were early on the idea that repeatable events beat highlight tape. First pass success, controlled exits, entries denied, net front wins, shift length. Those were tracked before spreadsheets got popular. When analytics later got loud, New Jersey's choices looked smarter in hindsight because they'd been measuring the right things all along. Coaches were selected for message consistency. Lemaire, Robinson, Burns. Different voices, same spine. Lou didn't want a stylistic reboot every time a bench changed. He wanted iterative tuning. That protected players from whiplash and allowed the team to evolve without losing itself. When tweaks were needed, more pace, a touch more pressure, they came as additions, not replacements. Media posture wasn't about secrecy for its own sake. It was about keeping the locus of control inside the room. Less noise meant fewer external cycles to manage. It also set a boundary. The product is the games, not the drama. In a market split between two New York narratives and its own energy, that quiet protected the thing that mattered. The real insight is that Lou's method turned philosophy into system and system into habit. He built an environment where the easiest thing to do was the right thing for the identity. That's how you get decades where different rosters produce the same feeling. Patient, precise, prepared. The Devils didn't just find a way to win, they built a way to be. The system's critics and defenders. Anyway, moving past the parades, the debate around New Jersey settled into a steady hum. The thing is, the trap made people pick sides. On one side, critics who felt the sport should live in open ice and wild rushes. On the other, coaches and players who just fought the Devils and knew how exhausting it was to try to create inside that picture. Critics made a few points on repeat. They said the neutral zone trap strangled offense and turned prime-time hockey into clock management. They argued that holding and interference had blurred into structure, that New Jersey won by gaming lenient officiating, and that young fans wouldn't fall in love with 2-to-1 games where the middle lane felt closed by policy. They framed it as a choice between entertainment and efficiency. Defenders answered from the bench, not the desk. They said the Devils weren't hiding, they were reducing risk the way good teams do in every sport. If basketball has half-court defense, if football has bend, don't break, hockey can have layered control. They pointed to how hard it is to teach 5 skaters to share one picture, to how much conditioning it takes to keep sticks flat, to reload above the puck every shift, to never chase. They said this wasn't loophole hockey, it was discipline hockey. Meanwhile, something else started to enter the conversation: numbers. Before public analytics got popular, staffers were tracking the quiet events that explain why New Jersey's games looked the way they did. Entries allowed with control versus without, defensive zone exits under pressure, slot chances conceded, time between retrieval and exit. When those measures later became public, the Devils' seasons aged well. Possession, when defined as controlled movement of the puck through zones, had been their language all along. The "bad for hockey" line didn't age as well under that light. If the point of the game is to create better chances than you give up, New Jersey's method fit the math. They didn't hunt volume, they hunted quality and denial. The trap took away dangerous entries and funneled shots to where Brodeur could manage first touches. Analysts who once scoffed at low shot totals began to separate shot location and pre-shot movement from raw counts. Suddenly, the Devils' control looked less like suppression for its own sake and more like chance engineering. Players who'd lived it added texture. Forwards talked about the mental toll of never finding a clean seam, how every attempt to cut inside met a stick and a shoulder, how cycles felt heavy because exits were one clean pass away. Defensemen admitted that the hardest part wasn't the hit, it was the absence of chaos. Chaos creates mistakes. New Jersey didn't offer much of it. You had to beat them in straight lines and thin air. Coaches, even the ones whose teams thrived on pace, respected the craft. They borrowed pieces. A 1-1-3 here, a more conservative F3 there. They'd say it quietly. You need a trap in your pocket for road games, for back-to-backs, for third periods with a lead. That's not copying New Jersey wholesale. That's acknowledging a tool that works when margins get thin. The officiating argument lived on. Were there holds missed? Sure. There are in every era. The Devils adapted as points of emphasis shifted. When the league clamped down after labor changes, New Jersey didn't crumble. They tightened their feet, trusted angles, and trimmed the gray that used to slide. The silhouette remained. Deny the middle, own the first touch, exit in two. From their perspective, Devils players seemed at peace with the discourse. They knew that praise wouldn't change how a series feels in May. They also knew that style points don't hang on rafters. If the sport wants both beauty and tension, that's fine. But in the third period of a one-goal playoff game, the thing that matters is whether your habits hold. New Jersey's did, year after year. The analytics wave became a quiet ally. Zone exit success rates with control, entry denial percentages, expected goals against from the slot. These metrics told the story the eye test had been hinting at. New Jersey didn't kill hockey, they killed bad hockey. They pushed opponents toward lower-value plays and cashed in on the few high-value looks they created. It was a well-oiled routine, not glamorous, but ruthlessly repeatable. And there's the balance. You can love end-to-end skill and still respect the craft of closing space. The Devils showed that a team can set the terms without yelling about it. Critics wanted a show, defenders saw a standard. Over time, the sport absorbed both truths. Coaches teach spacing with more care. Players value above-the-puck routes as much as toe drags. Fans who once booed the trap now nod when their team protects a lead with it. The real insight is this. The debate itself proved the impact. If a system forces a league to define what it values, flow, fairness, structure, spectacle, that system mattered. New Jersey didn't win the argument with words. They won it with nights where patience beat noise, where math matched film, and where quiet became a competitive edge. The 2012 unexpected run, systems' last hurrah. The thing is, the 2012 Devils didn't feel like a throwback at first glance. Different coach, faster league, whistles tighter, and Brodeur closer to the sunset than the sunrise. But when April hit, the old silhouette reappeared, not as a copy, more like muscle memory layered with a modern push. Pete DeBoer arrived with clarity. He didn't try to resurrect the exact trap of the 90s, he blended it. Neutral zone layers stayed, but the forecheck came in waves when reads were green. F3 stayed honest, yet the first two forwards hunted more aggressively off turnovers. The plan was simple: own the middle without surrendering momentum, tilt the ice when the map said go, and fall back into structure when it didn't. It looked less like a break, more like a clutch. Brodeur adjusted with the era. The trapezoid boxed his range, so he trimmed risk and doubled down on timing. Quick shoulder checks, cleaner touches, smarter flips. He didn't need to roam far to narrow the game. He needed to make first touches predictable. That, plus the same quiet saves in slot moments, gave New Jersey the foundation to push without fear. Round 1 against Florida turned into a patience test. Overtime after overtime, the Devils learned to win long nights again. They tightened the hinge, cut routes to the inside, and trusted Brodeur to smother the rebounds that leak when legs get heavy. The clincher felt like a callback: calm posture late, two-touch exits, and a finish born from discipline, not gamble. It wasn't artful, it was honest. Then came Philadelphia, noisy and fast. The series opened like a track meet, and New Jersey answered by slowing the decision tree without slowing their feet. DeBoer's group used a 2-1-2 forecheck in spurts to disrupt breakouts, then snapped into layers through the neutral zone. F1 took smarter inside-out angles, F2 erased the wall option, and F3 kept the lid on. The Flyers' rush game, usually their loudest weapon, turned into dump and chase under duress. That's when the Devils' old habit clicked: retrieval, bump, out. The counter chances they got weren't many, but they were clean and enough. Unknown to them, across town, skeptics waited for gravity to pull New Jersey back. Instead, the Rangers met a team that could toggle. The conference final became a New York-New Jersey identity check. The Devils didn't blink. They compressed the middle, attacked on scheduled triggers, and wore down defense pairs with a cycle that looked simple. Two men tied to the wall, a high safety valve, but moved the puck with pace. When the crease got crowded, Brodeur's patience under traffic saved the small plays that decide one-goal nights. His most famous piece of that series wasn't a spectacular glove. It was a stick, extended at the exact moment a loose puck needed clearing. Margin management again. Stevens' spirit lived in posture, not hits. The blue line owned inside position and body leverage more than highlight collisions. Forwards tracked above the puck, then peeled into lanes that kept stretch plays from forming. You could feel the room trusting the template. Take the right chip, accept the safe exit, live to cash the next read. The winning goal that sealed the series came off pressure layered on a tired pair. Work, recover, reset, then strike. No drama, just the best habits at the biggest time. The final brought a different puzzle. Los Angeles had size, structure of their own, and a goalie playing out of his mind. The series tilted early, and New Jersey had to chase from behind without betraying themselves. They pushed selectively, D active at the line with F3 disciplined, and still ran into a wall. It happens. What mattered, and what stands up in memory, is that the Devils didn't abandon their identity. Even down in games, they managed risk, protected the slot, and waited for a clean look. A post here, a bounce there, the margins went the other way. From their perspective, 2012 was closure, not coda. DeBoer showed a version of the machine that could live in the post-lockout world. Quicker touches, sharper switches, forecheck bursts attached to old-school restraint. The penalty kill echoed past Devils kills, sticks in lanes, clears with intent, line changes like choreography. 5-on-5, they strangled rushes without strangling their own offense. It wasn't 1995. It was the idea of 1995 adapted for a league that demanded more speed and more honesty with the stick. Brodeur's final masterpiece wasn't a single save, it was a run of composure. He took the random out of random nights. The defense kept sightlines clean. The forwards did the unglamorous work, chips at the right time, back pressure through the middle, short shifts that preserved the picture. You could see echoes of old captains in how players handled momentum swings. No hurry for hurry's sake, no panic when whistles went the other way. Let's be honest, the cup didn't come home that June. But the run proved something the numbers later underscored. The Devils' core truths still worked. Control the middle, own first touches, turn exits into planned speed, attach offense to defense with discipline. De Boer's voice, Brodeur's poise, and a roster that bought in gave the organization one more May that felt like the era everyone remembers. The real insight is that 2012 wasn't nostalgia. It was proof of concept under new rules. New Jersey didn't try to relive the past. They translated it. Calm made modern, patience with a faster beat, and the league had to respect the echo. The end of an era, Lamoriello's departure. The thing is, eras rarely end with a headline. They fade, decision by decision, until one morning the room feels different. After 2012's echo, the NHL kept speeding up. Whistles bit harder on obstruction. Possession surged as a league language. Contracts swelled under the cap's new math. New Jersey's silhouette still held, but the gaps between edges grew. Lou read change the way he always had, by tightening standards, not chasing trends. But the league's incentives shifted. Young cores got paid earlier. Stars drove rules and revenue. Teams built around pace and layers of skill that could live inside structure. The Devils' model, once an efficiency hack, now needed fresh fuel. More draft hits up front, more transition pop, more cap agility. The machine asked for parts that were getting harder to find at prices the organization would accept. Anyway, moving past the nostalgia, the roster aged in place. Veterans who knew the rhythm stayed a beat longer. Prospects who could quicken the beat were slower to break through. The draft offered answers, but patience costs in a league that rewards instant impact. Misses sting more when your system demands buy-in and timing. You felt it in third periods, where the picture was right and the playmaking wasn't. The hinge still denied entries. The exits needed a winger who could turn a chip into a threat in 2 strides. Meanwhile, the cap pressed. The thing is, Lou had mastered pre-cap leverage, term discipline, role clarity, value signings that fit the ask. In the cap era, edges moved to ELC years, middle-class efficiency, and bets on young ceiling. The organization stayed conservative, which protected the floor but limited the ceiling. You saw the effect in depth. Honest players, fewer game breaks. Games stayed low event by design and sometimes by default. Inside the building, identity never wavered. On time, accountable, team first. Outside, the margin for error shrank. The division hardened. Rival models leaned into speed through the middle, D who could transport under pressure, and forwards who could beat structure with pace and touch. The Devils could still make you play uncomfortable. They struggled to decide games with one push when the moment asked for it. This was the moment everything changed, not with a speech, but with a handoff. Lamoriello's departure marked more than a new nameplate on the door. It was the end of a closed loop where culture, coaching, scouting, and contracts spoke one dialect. The next chapter required translation. Keep the spine, add more speed. Keep the discipline, add more risk tolerance. Keep the humility, sell a vision to players raised on skill-first systems. From their perspective, the room felt the shift. Veterans who'd lived under quiet rules saw grey areas return. Different voices, new allowances, a bit more personality in the space where sameness used to live. That's not a complaint. It's an adaptation. Younger players exhaled with the loosened grip, then learned the cost of looseness in one-goal nights. The organization tried to bridge eras with incremental changes. Coaching voices emphasized pace without abandoning posture. The farm added transition reps, defensemen walking pucks under pressure, centers leading with cutbacks instead of quick rims. Draft meetings tilted slightly toward creative hands that could survive inside structure. The balance took time because muscle memory is stubborn. Let's be honest, the scoreboard didn't bless the transition right away. That's the tax of evolution. When you widen the lane for skill, mistakes spike before they shrink. When you invite defensemen to activate, the third man has to live higher, and one missed read looks louder than a safe chip. The Devils accepted that risk unevenly. Some nights clicked, clean exits into speed, modern forecheck triggers layered onto old discipline. Others frayed, too much gap on the line, too little touch in the slot. Lose exit left a template and a challenge. The template: build a team that wins habits, not headlines. The challenge: in a faster league, teach those habits at a speed that unlocks offense without breaking the middle. The thing is, New Jersey's legacy wasn't a system frozen in time. It was a standard for how to work. The departure closed a chapter that proved what patience can earn. The pages ahead asked a new question. Can patience and pace share the same bench and bring the state another June? Life after the machine, the modern Devils. The thing is, once the room changes, the ice does too. After the handoff, New Jersey searched for a new balance. How to honor the spine without freezing it in place. The silhouette faded at the edges, then returned in flashes, like muscle memory that needed a faster beat. Early on, the identity felt tentative. Coaching voices pushed for more pace through the middle, more green lights for defensemen to join, more retrievals that turned into possession instead of safe chips. You saw the intent. Exit with control, hit the middleman in stride, let skill work inside structure. But muscle memory is stubborn. On some nights, the third man stayed too low, the hinge sagged, and good ideas died at blue lines. On others, the switch flipped. Clean touches, layered entries, a forecheck that supported rather than chased. The swings were part of the lesson. Anyway, moving past the labels, the modern Devils tried to write a new chapter that still rhymed with the old. The farm updated reps to match the league. Defensemen learned to walk pressure, not just rim under duress. Centers worked on cutbacks with support underneath, not blind reverses. Wingers practiced wall plays that started offense, slips to the middle, one-touch bump-outs, without losing the habit of getting above the puck. The goal stayed the same: make the next person's job easier, just at a higher speed. Draft tables leaned toward hands and feet that could survive pace. The thing is, a creative forward who can delay and hit a late seam has to buy the same insurance the trap demanded. Arrive above the puck on the turn, stop on the defensive dots, own the next read. Teaching that at NHL speed took patience from the bench and humility from players raised on skill-first freedom. Some embraced it and grew into engines. Others stalled when the asks got tighter. From their perspective, veterans raised in the old room adjusted by degrees. The quiet rules loosened, but the core remained. On time, accountable, team first. A defenseman who once 8 minutes through posture now had to start plays with his feet and still arrive early to kill rushes. A winger who lived on safe chips learned to turn a chip into a give and go with pace. The balance became the story. Invite risk without inviting chaos. Systems evolved game by game. Neutral zone posture shifted from a classic 1-2-2 to a more elastic 1-1-3 at times, then into an aggressive 2-1-2 on cues. Soft rims, bobbled pucks, tired pairs. F3's job never vanished, it modernized. Instead of parking high by default, he read off pressure, sliding into pockets that let defensemen pinch without fear. That's the clutch over the break again, just with a quicker gear change. The cap era forced sharper choices. New Jersey chased ceiling through draft capital and development, while managing a floor built on honest habits. There were years where the process outpaced the results, expected goals tilting right, one-goal games tilting wrong. That's the tax of teaching a young core to close. Late in third periods, the old silhouette flickered. Protect the middle, win first touches, exit in two. The difference came from a stick blade in the slot or a rushed clearance under heat. Those details, once automatic, needed reps under noise. Coaching staff spoke a revised dialect of the same language. Details first, now expressed through speed. Practice reps emphasized five-man motion, D walking the line with layered cover, centers dropping low as automatic bump options, wingers slashing into space on exits. Film sessions circled the same truths. Arrive, don't chase. Play through hands, own the dots. But attached clips where pace made those choices tougher and more valuable. Home ice shifted too. The building leaned into energy, not mystique. The crowd learned the new cues. The ooh, not just for rushes, but for a perfect back pressure track that turned a 2-on-1 into nothing. That's culture maturing in public. The quiet nods of the old days turned into a steadier hum, and on good nights, the hum synced with the bench's rhythm. Let's be honest, finding a new identity is messy. There were streaks that promised the future and slumps that felt like the past without the payoff. But the arc bent toward clarity. Keep the spine, middle control, first touch poise, accountability, and add layers that unlock offense without breaking the picture. When it clicked, you saw a version of New Jersey built for the modern league. Defensemen who could exit under pressure, forwards who could create off the wall, and a team that could press or settle without losing itself. The real insight is the modern Devils aren't chasing ghosts. They're translating values. The method survived because it was never just the trap. It was spacing, patience, consequence, and now speed tied to those same anchors. When that translation holds, you feel the echo. Not nostalgia, but a familiar calm inside a faster game. The goaltending legacy post-Brodeur. The thing is, when a crease becomes an address for 2 decades, the mail keeps showing up long after the tenant leaves. Post-Brodeur, New Jersey faced an impossible task dressed up as a normal one. Keep calm where calm had become a habit. You don't replace a rhythm, you learn a new one without losing the old song's timing. Expectations were the first opponent. Every save got measured against a memory. That's unfair to any goalie, but it's real. The organization tried to reframe the job. Instead of asking the next netminder to be a puck-handling savant and a rebound whisperer, they narrowed the asks. Give us first saves, manage the crease, keep the picture readable for the 5 in front. Simpler job description, same stakes. Systemically, the team had to update its support. Without a goalie who could erase forechecks with a single touch, breakouts needed cleaner routes. Defensemen worked on retrieval scans and shoulder checks. Centers drilled low swing timing. Wingers learned to be available inside the dots for quick bump-outs. The trapezoid rules still constrained, but the real change was philosophical. Fewer goalie-driven exits, more shared responsibility under heat. Anyway, moving past the shadow, the room learned to build confidence in smaller increments. A new starter earned trust by winning the routine. Stick steers to predictable corners, gloves that kept pucks, resets after scrambles that didn't spiral. Coaches celebrated quiet saves in film sessions because quiet saves rebuild a team's pace between whistles. When the crease isn't chaos, the bench breathes. From their perspective, defensemen adjusted angles. With less roaming behind the net, the strong side D owned more first touches and had to absorb the first bump, then make a play. That meant shorter rims, more reverses, and a renewed emphasis on the weak side defenseman being 2 strides closer for the safety valve. The hinge stayed, just with tighter spacing to guard against turnovers inside the dots. The search in net became about archetypes. One path, positional anchors who beat plays on their feet and make the first stop look boring. The other, reflex goalies who could spike a game with athletic saves on nights the team leaked. Both types came through. Both learned the same lesson the hard way. In New Jersey, details decide your shelf life. Rebounds in the slot and traffic management carry more weight than the odd lunging highlight. Coaches updated goalie development to match the league's pace. Shorter recoveries, tighter post integrations, shuffle-first responses to east-west plays, video cut-ups focused on pre-shot movement, how to hold edges until the last pass, where to set hands so tips don't eat you alive, when to dead-stick a rim to buy your defense a beat. The curriculum didn't chase fads. It taught footwork that survives back doors and broken plays. Fans felt the adjustment curve. There were stretches where goals against came in clusters that didn't happen in the old days, and it stung. There were nights where a new starter settled the group with a 2-to-1 clinic, and the building exhaled in a way that felt familiar. That's how a legacy becomes a standard rather than a burden. You recognize the sound of a calm game again, even if the voice in net is different. Puck handling never disappeared, it just changed shape. Instead of threading weak-side lasers, post-brodeur goalies focused on simple kills, deadening dump-ins, nudging pucks to safe corners, quick bumps when pressure allowed. The thing is, you don't have to be a playmaker to be useful. You have to be predictable so 5 teammates can skate onto a pattern they trust. The cap era added pressure. Value contracts at goalie matter because misses tax the roster. New Jersey balanced bets. Stabilize with veterans when the room needed a floor. Develop prospects when the arc allowed patience. The farm mirrored NHL reads. Same retrieval calls, same low options, same point shot tracking with layers boxing out sticks. If a call-up arrived, the vocabulary traveled with him. Let's be honest, the comparisons never fully stop. That's fine. They become less about chasing a statue and more about honoring the idea behind it. Control your first touch, buy your team time, and turn panic into process. When a modern Devils goalie swallows a slot shot with no rebound and taps a post while the crowd goes quiet, the echo is clear. It's not the same voice, it's the same calm. The cultural impact on New Jersey hockey. The thing is, when a team lives by calm, the community learns it too. New Jersey's run didn't just stack banners, it rewired how the state thought about the sport, how kids practiced, how coaches taught, how rinks felt on winter nights. Quiet became a style and then a standard. Start with youth hockey. After the Cups, practices across the state adopted the Devils' vocabulary. Inside position, stick on puck, support underneath. Coaches who spent nights watching Stevens and Brodeur started building drills around spacing and first touches. Defensemen learned retrievals with a shoulder check before they learned crossovers at the blue line. Centers practiced low swings to be that outlet, even at the peewee level. The thing is, once kids feel what an easy exit does for a shift, they don't chase chaos for fun. They chase order because it gives them the puck back. Rinks multiplied, then filled. Families that once drove across the river to find ice found it closer, with clinics echoing the same messages the big club lived by. Saturday mornings got crowded with small area games that forced quick reads and short passes. New Jersey hockey in miniature. That repetition turned state tournaments into slow-burn chess instead of track meets. Parents learned to cheer a smart chip and a perfect back-pressure track like a deke. That's culture shifting in plain sight. High schools and local clubs mirrored the silhouette. The best teams owned the middle and squeezed mistakes, winning one-goal games with patience that felt advanced for kids. You'd hear it behind benches. F3, stay honest. Wingers, play through hands. D, 2 strides inside the dots. It wasn't a script, it was a shared memory. The Devils made the language of control easy to borrow. Perception changed, too. For years, New Jersey hockey lived in the shadow of louder markets. The Cups gave the state its own tone. Reserved, efficient, proud of work that didn't need a spotlight. Kids wore numbers tied to captains who didn't shout. Goalies stood taller on simple saves because simple saves got respect here. If you grew up in this era, you learned that a smart line change can get the same nod as a highlight. That reorders what young players chase. The fan base matured in that rhythm. Home nights in the Meadowlands and then Newark built an audience that understood low-event tension. A one game didn't clear seats, it pulled people closer. They tracked the hinge with their eyes and let out a calm cheer when a clean exit started a rush. The building found its noise in little wins, an early stick lift on the kill, a rim that Brodeur deadened back then, a modern bump-out that carried the old idea forward. That's how identity survives moves and rosters. Meanwhile, alumni spread the message. Coaches and scouts from the tree carried the system's habits to junior programs and college benches. They didn't export the trap as dogma, they exported the method. Teach spacing, reward patience, demand consequence. You see it in clinics where a former Devils assistant corrects a young defenseman's inside shoulder, then smiles when the next rep turns cleaner. That's a legacy you can feel on a Tuesday. Local pride followed suit. Media learned to appreciate detail without selling drama. Community events leaned into fundamentals. Free clinics on wall play and safe checking. Talks about accountability and team-first habits. Hockey here began to look like a reliable routine. Show up, do the small things, win the hour. The real insight is New Jersey didn't just win games. It gave the state a way to love the game. Quiet, steady, and confident that the little choices stack into something big. The analytics revolution. Validation of the system. The thing is, the numbers didn't arrive with trumpets. They crept in through back doors, private spreadsheets, hand-tallied logs, coaches' notebooks filled with marks that looked like math before anyone called it that. When public analytics finally got loud, the Devils' old choices started to look less like taste and more like proof. Early on, the debate lived in shot totals. Critics said low event meant low entertainment, and by extension, low virtue. But when analysts began separating shot quality from shot count, the picture changed. Expected goals broke the surface, and with it came a language the Devils had been speaking for years. Keep attempts to the outside, remove east-west passes before shots, and make the crease predictable. The model caught up to the method. Zone entries told a similar story. Tracking work showed that controlled entries, not just any entries, drive dangerous offense. New Jersey's trap had always aimed at that seam. Force dumps, kill speed, meet carriers at the line with sticks flat and legs quiet. On paper, the effect was clear. Fewer controlled entries against, fewer high-danger chances, more nights where one goal against felt like a ceiling, not a floor. Data turned a feeling into a line on a chart. Then came exits. Controlled exits have the same weight on the other side of the puck. Leave clean and you start with numbers. Rim blindly and you chase. The Devils' first pass philosophy, once dismissed as safe hockey, graded out as efficiency. Defensemen who made the short, flat pass under pressure were the ones whose teams transitioned with control. Centers who swung low on time turned chaos into a lane. Analysts started logging exit with possession, and New Jersey's old film got friendlier. Microstats added texture. Stick checks at the line, denial percentages, retrieval to exit times. The quiet plays that decide whether you're defending again in 6 seconds or attacking in 4 finally had a column. Stevens' habit of holding the inside dots moved from law to metric. Forwards who reloaded early showed up as suppressors, not just grinders. That matters in a league that often judged by points alone. Meanwhile, something else was happening. Coaches around the league borrowed pieces once they saw the math. A 1-1-3 appeared in road games to settle crowds. F3 lifted higher late in periods to mute trailers. Teams without Brodeur's puck handling still taught the bump to the weak side because the expected value beat the glass and out. It wasn't a copy of New Jersey's trap. It was the spread of an idea the numbers endorsed. Possession models matured from raw Corsi to context. Score effects adjusted out the noise that made low-event nights look passive. Suddenly, leading teams that bled shot attempts but not chances looked smarter. The Devils had lived there for years, protecting the middle, trading distant looks for controlled exits. Analysts added pre-shot movement to chance quality, and again the silhouette held. New Jersey took away passes across the Royal Road and made you shoot through bodies. That wasn't cynicism, it was risk management. From their perspective, former Devils smiled at the graphs. They didn't need validation, but it felt good to hear the language they'd lived become common. Practice clips of two-touch exits turned into teaching tools online. Clinics discussed denial layers like they'd always had a label. Players who'd been called boring found themselves cited in threads about suppressing high-danger chances. The thing is, nothing changed on the ice. The lens just sharpened. Analytics also clarified the nuance. Structure isn't stalling if it leads to better offense later. Tracking rush chances created off successful denials showed a trade New Jersey bet on. Give up a shot from the wall, gain a rush off the next touch. Expected goals off the counter spiked compared to cycle shots under pressure. The Devils had always banked that margin. The numbers filed it under value. Of course, the models had limits. They struggled with goalie puck handling's indirect effects. Shorter shifts, fewer heavy retrievals, better line changes. But proxies emerged. Defensive zone time after dump-ins, controlled exits after goalie touches. Even there, New Jersey's past popped. Brodeur's small passes shaved seconds, and seconds turned into fresher legs when the game got thin. Anyway, moving past the old arguments, the analytics wave didn't erase aesthetic preferences. It gave coaches a shared map. If you wanted to play fast, fine, just understand where speed creates quality and where it burns gas. If you wanted control, measure which controls actually nudge outcomes. The Devils' legacy landed in the middle. Speed attached to spacing, discipline that produced expected value. The real insight is that analytics didn't make the Devils right. They made the reasoning visible. What looked like caution was often optimization. What sounded like dull was, in the ledger, efficient. New Jersey taught a generation to see hockey as a chain of small bets. The data just put the odds on screen. The Quiet Hall of Famers. The thing is, the plaques tell one story, but with New Jersey, the real story lives in the quiet years between ceremonies. The Devils' Hall of Famers didn't arrive with billboards. They arrived with habits that outlasted spotlights, and that's why their legacies read softer but carry farther. Start with the captain. Scott Stevens was a headline hit machine in memory, but day-to-day, he was economy. Inside shoulder, early gap, stick first. The big collisions came from perfect angles, not hunts for noise. Younger defensemen learned that posture beats panic, and that the most valuable clip is the one that never becomes a clip. His haul call was inevitable, but his influence was the standard he left behind. Partners who played inside dots by default. Forwards who trusted that the middle wouldn't melt under pressure. Scott Niedermayer moved like water through traffic. The thing is, his glide had intent. He didn't dangle for applause. He transported for relief and advantage. One turn at the blue line could buy a line change or open a passing lane that didn't exist a second earlier. In a system built on structure, He brought oxygen without breaking shape. That's a hard trick. It made him a bridge between eras, proof that freedom and order can share a shift when the reeds are clean. Martin Brodeur already sits in a wing of the hall built on totals, but the totals miss the human piece. Teammates felt him as time. Extra seconds to set a breakout, fewer minutes spent trapped under a heavy cycle, calmer breaths after a save that deadened chaos. His ceremony crystallized a truth the room knew for years. The goalie wasn't just behind the system, he was part of it, stitching exits to entries with small, repeatable touches. Patrick Elias rarely demanded volume, he found value. Understated edges, two-way conscience, and a knack for the right line at the right time. He read off centers, arrived as F3 by instinct, and still created from quiet spots. In a league that judges wings by raw totals, he built a case on play driving and patience, then stacked points anyway. His path to wider acclaim took longer because he fit the room too well. Team first in a league that often rewards the loudest soloists. Ken Daneyko belongs in the conversation as culture embodied. Shot blocks, net front wars, shift lengths trimmed to protect structure. He played within a box many would find too small, then turned that box into a strength. His value shows up in other people's numbers. Goalies with clean sight lines, partners who could make first passes under calmer pressure, coaches who slept easier knowing their third pair would repeat the plan. Coaches from this tree carry their own quiet case. Jacques Lemaire, Larry Robinson, Pat Burns. Their rings tell you one thing. The consistency of message tells you another. Different benches, same spine. They taught details like they were virtues, and players bought in because the details paid rent every spring. Their recognition often reads as team achievement, and that's exactly the point. They built teams that behaved like one mind. There's a cost to playing inside a machine. Individual awards skew toward big counting numbers and loud nights. Devils legends often split credit with the system they helped shape. That's why some acknowledgements arrived later than talent alone would predict. Voters caught up to the nuance with time and with new language. Possession, expected goals, denial rates, that captured what the eye saw years earlier. Meanwhile, something else happened. Delayed appreciation deepened the bond between players and the state. Induction nights felt like reunions, not coronations. The roll call of names, captains, anchors, artisans, sounded like a blueprint read aloud. Fans who'd spent winters cheering 2-1 wins heard their values reflected on stage. Patience, spacing, consequence. No pyrotechnics needed. From their perspective, the hall was never the aim. The aim was May and June. But the plaques matter because they protect the idea that subtlety can dominate. A clean exit can be art. A denied entry can be as thrilling, in the right building, as a breakaway. New Jersey taught that lesson, then sent it into the sport through the people who lived it. The real insight is that the Devils' Hall of Famers make a collective argument. Greatness doesn't have to shout. It can whisper the same answer, shift after shift, until the room, the league, and the record book nod along. That's a legacy built to last. The rivalries forged in the trap era. The thing is, systems don't skate alone. They meet other identities, and that friction makes rivalries real. In the trap era, New Jersey's calm kept colliding with teams built on noise, speed, or stage lights, and the edges sparked. Start with the obvious, across the river. Rangers Devils wasn't just proximity, it was philosophy. Manhattan leaned into stars and storylines. New Jersey leaned into silence and structure. In the early 90s, that difference felt like a dare. The 1994 series scarred and steeled New Jersey. Every inch of the neutral zone became a bargaining chip, every dump a chess move. The building noise changed zip codes, but the posture didn't. From then on, whenever they met in spring, you could feel the argument on the ice. Can patience beat pressure under the biggest lights? By 2000 and 2012, the script matured. New Jersey didn't blink in sudden death moments, layered the middle, and squeezed the Rangers' rush game into the boards. Games often swung on a single exit or a puck managed clean at the line. Fans read those microplays like chapters. A smart chip drew the same roar as a breakaway because everyone understood the cost of a mistake in those nights. Philadelphia brought a different electricity, edge and elbows, a forecheck that wanted chaos. The Flyers tried to pry open New Jersey's spacing by hitting the hinge, rattling retrievals, and living in the blue paint. The Devils answered by turning their aggression into traps. F1 absorbed the first hit on the wall, F2 picked the pocket, F3 stayed honest. Cycles died early, rushes shrank. In playoff series, frustration showed in after-whistle scrums. The scoreboard showed in 2-1 as the Devils could throttle. Philly fans wanted a brawl. New Jersey offered a grind. That clash of preference became the rivalry's heartbeat. Down south, Detroit stood as the craft mirror. The Red Wings had their own machine: possession, precision, east-west seams at speed. The 1995 final framed it. One team wanted control through the puck, the other through space. New Jersey sealed the inside, redirected rushes, and countered on schedule. The sweep wasn't an upset as much as a resolution. If you deny controlled entries and control first touches, a high-skill system can suffocate inside your map. Respect followed, stubborn and mutual. Later meetings felt like masterclasses, not grudge matches. Ottawa was a study in patience versus promise. The Senators' youth and skill pressed the Devils to hold their shape longer, block lanes cleaner, and accept long stretches without the puck. New Jersey leaned into denial and goaltending, waiting for the turnover that turned series. The thing is, when a rivalry grows from long, low-scoring games, you learn to love the margins. A face-off win with 30 seconds left. A rim that dies perfectly behind the net. The kind of details that stick with you years later. Boston and Toronto had chapters too. Heavy lines and historic pressure facing a team that diffused pressure by shortening the rink. Against Boston's grind, New Jersey kept bodies inside and let point shots glance off shin pads into exits. Against Toronto's flair, they flattened the neutral zone and made entries predictable. Not enemies exactly, just styles that sharpened New Jersey's method. From their perspective, Devils players felt these rivalries in muscle memory. Different sweaters, same asks. Arrive above the puck, take the middle, don't bite first. The hits were real, the quotes got loud, but the outcome usually traced to the same map. Opponents complained about flow. Coaches, even on the other bench, nodded at execution. Meanwhile, fans learned the rhythms. In the Meadowlands and later Newark, you could hear anticipation rise not on odd-man rushes alone, but when F3 settled in the slot and a defenseman pinched at the exact right beat. The trap era taught a region to enjoy defense like offense, because here it was offense just delayed by a pass or two. The real insight is these rivalries weren't just grudges, they were debates played at pace. New Jersey's answer didn't change much: trust the map. Over time, even the loudest buildings had to respect how often that map led to handshakes. The international influence. The thing is, ideas travel faster than players. As New Jersey kept stacking quiet wins, coaches overseas started clipping shifts, pausing tapes, and asking a simple question: how do you teach control without killing creativity? The answer found its way across the Atlantic in small pieces: spacing rules, neutral zone layers, retrieval habits, translated into languages that already prized structure. In Sweden and Finland, where team play sits at the center, the trap wasn't a dirty word, it was a diagram. Junior coaches began folding 1-1-3 and 1-2-2 concepts into development skates, not to smother, but to give young players a map. Wingers learned to own the wall without stapling themselves to it. Centers practiced the low swing as a default, then jumped into the middle with speed once exits turned clean. Defensemen drilled shoulder checks on retrievals so their first touch set a pass, not a battle. The picture looked familiar, New Jersey's silhouette with Nordic patience. In the Czech Republic and Slovakia, where puck protection and counterpunch live side by side, the Devils' timing became a teaching tool. Coaches emphasized delayed pressure. Arrive on the body as the pass arrives on the stick. That beat, late enough to avoid chasing, early enough to force bad touches, turned into clinic talk. Neutral zone angles tightened, and counterattacks came from recognition, not risk. It mirrored New Jersey's road formula: deny control, then spring into what the ice offers. Russia took its own cut. The KHL's wider sheets reward speed and east-west deception, but even there, teams started layering a high F3 to protect against long stretch plays. The idea wasn't to bury offense, it was to make offense sustainable. When clubs toggled to a 1-1-3 with a lead, you could see a Devils echo. Force dumps, kill speed at the line, let defensemen win first touches without panic. The counter, quick bump to middle ice, carry with support, felt like a borrowed page. Meanwhile, alumni moved the method by hand. Former Devils assistants took benches in Europe and brought the vocabulary with them. Inside dots, first touch, two-touch exits. They didn't sell a trap kit, they sold alignment. One bench run by a Lemaire disciple in Switzerland taught F3 reads as a rhythm exercise. Up, in, off, until forwards could switch from forecheck to posture without looking. Another in Germany built penalty kills around stick lanes and short clears, shaving seconds off every scramble. The export wasn't a scheme, it was standards. International tournaments showed the blend. National teams that wanted tempo still built a defensive skeleton out of layers. You saw it in medal rounds, third periods tilting low event by choice, lines shortening, neutral zone seams drying up. A one-goal lead carried the same math in Helsinki as it did in the Meadowlands. Coaches didn't quote the Devils, they coached like the Devils had proven the math. The thing is, the global game didn't become New Jersey on repeat. It absorbed the pieces that travel: middle control, first touch poise, and the value of a calm F3. Skill kept its space, structure kept the lights on. Today, when a European club closes the neutral zone in the last 5 minutes, or a junior coach in Gothenburg praises a clean bump-out more than a risky deke, that's the echo. Quiet, useful, and built to live anywhere hockey asks for patience. The drafting philosophy, finding system players. The thing is, the Devils didn't draft star power, they drafted certainty. Not certainty in points, but in choices. Their board tilted toward players who already moved like the system wanted them to move. Heads up on retrievals, sticks quiet in lanes, feet that recovered before they chased. If a prospect's tape showed one clean support read after another, that was a louder signal than a highlight goal in space. Traits came first. Hockey sense meant timing, not just creativity. Could a center feel the low swing under pressure and be there a beat before the defenseman looked? Could a winger work the wall with soft hands, hold a defender for a half second, and slip a bump to the middle? Could a defenseman shoulder check twice on a retrieval, fake the rim, and hit the first pass clean? These weren't auditions for flair. They were auditions for reliability under heat. Skating mattered, but in a specific way. Straight-line speed thrilled crowds. The Devils prized edges and recoveries. They watched whether a prospect could widen his base at the blue line without losing posture. whether he could close a gap in 2 strides, then stop on the dots instead of gliding past the play. Balance over burst, because balance holds up in May. Character wasn't a platitude. Interviews probed habits. Do you change first when the play dies? Do you track above the puck by default? Do you accept that your best shift might be a clean exit and a line change? If a player's identity needed the puck to feel engaged, New Jersey saw risk. If a player felt pride in the small win that set the next win, New Jersey saw fit. Anyway, moving past intangibles, the scouting meetings leaned on translatable skills. Forwards who could make 2-touch plays in traffic earned stars on the report. Centers with responsible routes became priority because the system starts with a reliable hinge. Defensemen who processed pressure at the offensive blue, walk, drag, slip, were marked as modern fits without abandoning the old spine. They also hunted edges in places others skimmed. Overages with grown man posture at the line. European role players whose reads were pro-ready even if their point totals were light. High school or late bloomers who showed clean decisions at slower levels and projected to keep those decisions as tempo rose. The thing is, if your method rewards repeatable habits, you can find value where the market still chases flash. Misses taught lessons they obeyed. When they reached for raw speed without the reads, the prospect stalled at the system's asks. Arrive early, not just fast. When they gambled on shot-first wingers who lived low, F3 broke and the machine leaked. Those seasons reinforced the board. Intelligence before wattage, posture before panic. Development synced with selection. The farm didn't just polish, it translated. Every prospect learned the same retrieval language, the same neutral zone layers, the same F3 discipline with modern toggles. Coaches graded the details that survive promotion: shoulder checks, first pass accuracy under contact, above the puck routes after turnovers. If a kid could do that at 18 on a Friday, he'd likely do it at 24 in a Game 5. From their perspective, players felt the clarity. You knew what earned ice. Win first touches, keep the middle, turn exits into possession, change on time. You also knew the reward: trust in tight games. Even skill players learned to tie their playmaking to the spine. Delay above the dots, attack when the map opens, live to create again. Draft tables never ignored ceiling. They just defined ceiling as sustainable impact in spring. A winger who could steal pucks on the forecheck, delay for a seam, then arrive high on the turn. That's a New Jersey player. A defenseman who denied entries without fouling, moved a puck in 2 touches, and killed rushes with feet, not grabs. That's a New Jersey core piece. The real insight is the Devils drafted for a picture. Not a highlight reel, a picture. 5 skaters sharing one idea. If a prospect already colored inside those lines and could add a shade or two, the organization bet the habits would scale. That's how you keep a machine quiet and humming. The coaching carousel, consistency in message. The thing is, faces changed, but the voice stayed the same. Through Jacques Lemaire, Larry Robinson, and Pat Burns, and the assistants who bridged those rooms, the Devils didn't chase novelty. They refined a dialect. Control the middle, win first touches, attach offense to defense, and don't confuse activity with impact. Lemaire set the grammar: calm bench, short shifts, and a neutral zone map that asked players to think a beat earlier. He didn't sell the trap as a cage, he sold it as a shortcut to clean puck touches. Practice was repetition, angling, sticks flat, F3 honest, until the reads felt automatic. That's how habits become identity. Larry Robinson softened the edges without loosening the spine. He let skilled pieces breathe, especially from the back end, but tied every green light to coverage underneath. The message landed like this: bring the puck with you, bring a layer with you. Defensemen stepped to hold lines because they trusted a center that lived low and arrived high on time. Pat Burns turned the detail into demand. His groups played firm, direct hockey. Win body position first, win puck second, then play. He added bite at the blue line and support on the wall, which made the same structure feel heavier. Under him, the forecheck had a sharper first step, but the third man never drifted. The map didn't change, the tempo did. Anyway, moving past the nameplates, assistants kept continuity. Robbie Ftorek, John McLean, and later voices translated the core into modern toggles. 1-1-3 when protecting leads. 2-1-2 on soft rims. Hinges that flowed with the puck, not the clock. Video rooms circled the same truths. Arrive above, deny inside, two-touch exits. Now layered with speed reads. Unknown to many outside, the farm mirrored it all. Albany and Lowell ran the same retrieval calls, the same low swing, the same kill routes. Call-ups heard familiar words and slotted in without noise. That's how you weather injuries, slumps, and the odd off night. One message, many messengers. The real insight is coaching here wasn't personality, it was translation. Different tones, same sentence, and the players never had to guess what mattered. The equipment and innovation legacy. The thing is, rules and gear usually feel like background noise, until one player or one team nudges them into the foreground. New Jersey did that, not with flash, but with small edges that made the game tidier, calmer, and harder on opponents who loved chaos. Start in the crease. Brodeur's puck handling wasn't a party trick, it was an efficiency tool. He turned dump-ins into 50-50 pucks, then into clean exits with short, flat touches. That skill pushed the league to draw lines on the ice, the trapezoid, so goalies couldn't erase forechecks by roaming into the corners. You can argue the intent, but the cause and effect is clear. A goalie acting like a third defenseman made the sport rethink where goalies were allowed to play the puck. Even after the trapezoid arrived, the habits he forced stayed. Teams had to practice retrievals under less goalie help. Defensemen had to shoulder check earlier. Wingers had to be outlets, not just glass and out. That's influence written into paint and practice plans. His gear mattered too, because the league tightened specs with him in mind. Paddle length, blocker shape, the way a stick could deaden a hard rim. Equipment committees kept asking whether small advantages were tilting play. Brodeur lived at the edge of those rules, but rarely beyond them. He adjusted faster than the debates did, trimming, tweaking, and still turning pucks into passable objects, not hazards. That adaptability taught a generation of goalies the real lesson. Your gear is only as good as your reads, and the cleanest touch is usually the shortest one. On the skater side, New Jersey's defensemen nudged thinking on sticks and shin guards. If you're going to deny the middle, your stick has to live there. Players shortened lies to keep blades flat on the ice and chose patterns that favored deflection control over heavy shots from the point. The aim wasn't to rip pucks through traffic, it was to put pucks into lanes teammates could touch and retrieve. Shot tips became a deliberate play, not an accident. Forwards mirrored it with softer curves that made wall plays and one-touch bump-outs more reliable under pressure. That's equipment as a passing language, not a scoring obsession. Meanwhile, skate profiles and hollow choices followed the plan. The Devils prioritized balance and recovery over raw top speed. Defensemen skated shallower hollows to keep glide through contact and hold posture on tight gaps. Forwards tuned blends that let them stop in the dots rather than loop past plays. It sounds granular, but those edges preserve the map. Hold the line, arrive early, stop on time. Coaches and trainers leaned into legal innovation in the video room. Before player tracking went league-wide, New Jersey tagged retrieval to exit times and tracked where dump-ins died. They charted which rims could be deadened by the goalie, which needed a defenseman's body, and how far F3 had to shade to protect a pinch. That data wasn't a spreadsheet flex, it was a bench tool. If a rim on the right side kept trapping them, they changed the angle or shifted a forward starting spot by a stride. Micro-adjustments, quietly delivered, repeatedly paid off. Face-offs got a similar treatment. Stick flex, blade twist, hand position. Centers tested combos that created predictable outcomes for set plays. Win to the weak side with a soft handle that won't bounce, or tie up with a stiffer shaft so your winger can rake. The point was repeatability. If you can script the first touch after a draw, you can script the next 10 seconds. In New Jersey, 10 seconds often decided the feel of a whole period. Even the bench area became part of the edge. Line change choreography turned into a craft. Lighter gloves staged near the gate for penalty killers. Tape marks on the boards for where a third man stood in late-game posture. Stick racks laid so a lefty could grab without a glance. Small logistics that shaved heartbeats off decisions. Opponents felt it as pressure. The Devils felt it as routine. Referee relations counted as innovation too, because understanding how interference and obstruction were being called on a given month shaped how to gap, how to angle, and how to use body position without drifting into whistles. Staff tracked standard shifts in enforcement and translated them into language players could act on. Hands quiet, hips first, stick parallel. When standards tightened post-lockout, New Jersey adjusted the tools. More feet, less grab, without surrendering the same territorial goals. The real insight is that New Jersey's innovation rarely looked like invention. It looked like tidying up every interface between player, tool, and rule. If equipment is a conversation with the game, the Devils kept it short and clear. Blades that keep you upright, sticks that feed exits, goalie gear that turns heat into a handleable bounce. Nothing loud, everything useful. And over time, the league bent, a little, to meet that standard. The lockout years, system in different contexts. The thing is, stoppages don't pause identity, they test it. New Jersey ran its method through two very different lockout eras, and each time the map had to hold under new weather. In 1995, the shortened season compressed the league's patience. Teams tried to sprint into form. The Devils leaned into something steadier. Less runway meant fewer reps to polish timing, but it also meant edges mattered more. Clean first touches, inside posture, and a goalie who could turn dumps into exits without drama. The schedule jammed games together, so fatigue crept in fast. That's where short shifts and low event control added value. You didn't chase, you managed miles. The trap wasn't a stall, it was a way to play 3 games in 4 nights without fraying. Playoff hockey arrived like a test of conviction. Opponents pushed for chaos to crack the rhythm. New Jersey answered with layered patience. Neutral zone angles squeezed, entries died into boards, and counters came from denial, not risk. The sweep in the final didn't read as a fluke inside the room. It read as proof that compressed calendars reward teams that waste no touches. The thing is, when every shift is a bet and the sample is small, the team that spends fewer chips per minute usually lasts longer. A decade later, the 2004 to 2005 lockout rewired the rulebook. Obstruction standards tightened, the red line came up for 2-line passes, and the trapezoid fenced goalies into smaller footprints. On paper, those changes threatened the old silhouette. Less clutching, more speed through the middle, fewer goalie roaming advantages. New Jersey didn't panic. They translated again. Without as much behind-the-net help, retrievals became more collaborative. Defensemen shoulder-checked sooner. Centers lived lower as automatic outlets. Wingers practiced slashing off the wall into space, not just chipping and hoping. The 2-touch exit turned into a 1.5-touch exit. Sell the rim, slip the middle, and move before forecheckers could set sticks. That kept the picture tidy even as the pace quickened. The neutral zone needed new tools. If carriers could stretch you with longer passes, your first read had to cheat less and see more. The Devils toggled between a 1-2-2 that angled early and a 1-1-3 that absorbed pressure, depending on game state. F3 stayed honest, but his job evolved. Not a parked safety, a moving lid that slid with the puck and freed defensemen to hold lines legally. Feet and angles, not hands and holds. Penalty kills felt the whistle change too. Hooks turned into instant calls, so sticks had to live in lanes without riding hips. New Jersey leaned into pressure at the blue when clears were there, and sagged to the dots when seams threatened. It was the same math, rephrased. Take away east-west, front shots, and live to exit clean. Offense found its air without losing the spine. With the red line gone, stretch threats pulled defenders back a stride. The Devils used that space to hit late trailers and create off-controlled entries. Still selective, still tied to coverage. Defensemen who used to rim safely now walked pressure and hit the weak side with pace when the hinge allowed. It wasn't flash, it was permission granted by structure. Anyway, moving past the shock of new standards, what survived was the core belief. Efficiency scales. In a shortened season, it keeps legs fresh. In a faster league, it keeps minds clear. The trapezoid clipped a weapon, but it didn't erase the idea that first touches decide tempo. Post-lockout, New Jersey's calm adapted its tools and kept the same outcome in sight. Low chaos, predictable pictures, and a game that bent toward control even when the rulebook nudged toward speed. The real insight is, context changes style points. It doesn't have to change substance. The unsung heroes, role players' contributions. The thing is, a system doesn't hold because stars carry it. It holds because the fourth line, the second pair, and the penalty killers make the map feel the same in minute 5 as in minute 55. In New Jersey, the role players weren't background. They were the screws you never noticed because they never rattled. Start at the wall. Wingers who could win pucks without drawing eyes made the trap hum. They learned how to bait contact, turn the hips, and slip a bump inside to a swinging center. That half-second bought the breakout. If the read wasn't there, they ate the puck, pinned it, and let support arrive. The shifts might end with a clean chip and change, and the bench would nod, because that's a winning play in this room. No rush, no roar, but the next line starts on schedule. Centers on depth lines wore 2 watches, one for the face-off clock, one for the game clock. They knew when to slow a draw to set a play, when to quick drop and sprint to cover a pinch, and when to live as F3 for a full shift because the opponent's top line wanted an odd-man rush. They treated the middle like a job site. Arrive on time, leave it cleaner than you found it. The thing is, when your fourth-line center plays like that, the coach can chase matchups without fear. Defensemen outside the marquee names carried the plan between whistles. Simple gaps, sticks flat, first touches that settled scrums into passes. They didn't hunt hits. They found body position early and let the collision be the result of the angle. On retrievals, they took the extra shoulder check that turns panic into a 2-touch exit. Off the boards, onto a blade, into the neutral zone with 3 skaters already moving. Their shifts rarely ended with a cheer. They ended with a line change at center ice and a coach tapping the next pair because the zone had flipped. Penalty killers lived on details. Sticks were extensions, not ornaments. Blade in the lane, hands quiet, shoulders squared to force the pass you'd planned for. If the clear wasn't clean, they protected the dots and fronted shots, trusting the goalie to handle what he could see. You could feel their pride in 10-second wins. A tipped pass out of rhythm, a rim that died behind the net, a soft chip that turned into 20 feet of relief. Those little choices stacked into nights where the power play never found its bearings. Meanwhile, something else was happening across the bench. The grinders added offense the same way they killed it, by timing. Second waves off controlled exits. A late layer arriving as the high option when the rush slowed. Low event doesn't mean no creativity. It means creativity attached to structure. A third-line winger who tracked back like a center could also be the trailer on a 3-on-2 because the first 2 touches were clean. Coaches trusted those layers because the layers came with coverage. Micro-stories lived in the routine. A role defenseman eating a heavy shift down 2 men, taking a shot off the knee, and still getting the next clear off the glass to a safe spot. A depth forward winning 3 consecutive board battles without ever touching the puck. Body positioning that steered it to a teammate each time. A face-off specialist losing a draw on purpose to pin the opposing center's stick, giving his winger the half-step to rake and exit. None of it trends. All of it wins. Bench rhythm mattered too. Veterans on the third pair teaching a call-up where to stand on a neutral zone draw so the hinge stays true. A fourth-line center reminding wingers 2 strides inside the dots before they hop. The room policed the standard gently but firmly. If a shift drifted outside the plan, the correction came fast and quiet. That's how culture becomes habit, and habit becomes muscle memory. Anyway, moving past stat lines, the value shows up in trust. Coaches that can roll 4 lines and 3 pairs without flinching drain tension out of a playoff series. Opponents feel it as fatigue. No soft minutes, no shift off. The Devils made that a feature. If the top line stalled, the third line took defensive zone draws and reset the ice. If a lead shrank, the penalty killers shortened the period with clears and dead pucks. Let's be honest, role players rarely get nights named after them. But New Jersey gave them meaning that lasts longer than a headline. When a winger seals the wall and bumps the puck to safety, when a defenseman wins the inside step and turns a cycle into a whistle, when a penalty killer reads a seam a beat early and taps a stick as he exits, that's the machine, humming. The real insight is the Devils didn't ask their role guys to be more than they were. They asked them to be exactly that, every shift, under heat. And they were. The Arena Saga, building a home. The thing is, a team's style seeps into the building it calls home. For New Jersey, the rink wasn't just an address, it was a tool, then a mirror, then finally a voice that matched the room. Start with the Meadowlands. Brendan Byrne became Continental Airlines Arena, but the feel stayed the same. Off the highway, tucked beside parking lots and marshland, a little removed from the roar across the river. That distance fit the Devils. It kept the noise low and the focus narrow. Inside, the ice ran fast and honest. Boards had a steady kick, the glass didn't rattle you into mistakes, and the corners felt square, predictable enough that retrievals and bump-outs turned routine. That predictability is gold for a team built on first touches and exits. If a rim behaved the same on Wednesday as it did on Saturday, you could script a shoulder check, a false shoulder, and a clean pass into space. The building's simplicity helped the map come alive. Home ice became an ally because matchups mattered. Last change let coaches lock the middle with the right center and roll pairs that fit the opponent's rush lines. The arena's sight lines gave the bench a clean read of the neutral zone, so assistants could tap shoulders a stride earlier. That rhythm, line after line on time, turned these halls into a place where 1-goal leads felt larger. Fans learned the cues and leaned in on pens, not popcorn. A calm cheer after a perfect hinge. A swell after a deadened dump by the goalie. Low event, high control, and the building breathing with it. But there was one problem. Identity isn't just what you do, it's where you invite people to see it. The Meadowlands carried its quirks, location, acoustics, the sense that you were always a short drive from somewhere louder. As the 200s moved on, The franchise needed a home that reflected what it had become: professional, confident, and rooted in the state, not orbiting a city. The move to Newark changed the sentence, not the grammar. Prudential Center opened with sharper edges, modern sightlines, tighter bowl, better acoustics. The ice stayed honest, but the boards had a livelier read off hard rims, and the corners returned pucks a touch faster. For a team that treated retrievals like a craft, that meant refreshing the playbook. Defensemen set their angles a half step earlier, centers shaded lower a beat sooner, and wingers adjusted their wall touch so bump-outs didn't overrun the stick. It's a small tweak that keeps the system intact when the environment shifts. The practical perks mattered. A downtown location pulled fans by train and foot, not just by car. That changed the sound, a hum that built through the night instead of popping on arrival. The lower bowl kept the ice in your lap, and the neutral zone tension read clearly from every seat. For a building audience keyed to details, that closeness made the chess visible. You could track F3 without squinting. You could hear a stick call on an exit and watch the pass arrive on time. The building taught the game the Devils played. Behind the scenes, the new home helped the process. Better facilities turned practice into repetition without compromise. Video rooms that could slice retrieval to exit clips within minutes. A practice sheet that matched the main ice so bounces and boards didn't surprise anyone at puck drop. The thing is, preparation is culture. When the rink gives you clean inputs, your habits tighten. Identity found walls to hang on. In Newark, banners didn't feel borrowed, they felt anchored. The concourses told a quiet story: captains, saves, small moments that made big months. Game nights synced the old cadence with a sharper presentation. No need for spectacle. The building trusted the product. Defense as anticipation, offense as a result, patience as a shared habit. Meanwhile, the ice stayed a partner. Home ice advantage for New Jersey never meant funny bounces or tricks. It meant familiarity, how a puck would settle on a soft chip, where a rim would slow enough for a goalie to handle, how the far corner lived for a lefty relief valve. Opponents felt it as friction. The Devils felt it as comfort. That's what a home is in hockey terms. Not a stage, a surface you know better than the other team. The real insight is the arena saga tracks the franchise's voice. The Meadowlands let the machine form in quiet. Newark gave it a street address and a tighter echo. Different roofs, same map. And every night, the crowd that learned to love smart chips and patient gaps found a place that let that taste carry. The media relations. Quiet excellence. The thing is, silence was part of the plan. Not secrecy, standards. New Jersey treated media the way they treated the neutral zone. Clear lanes, few risks, and an emphasis on what helps the group. Quotes weren't designed to trend, they were designed to align. You heard a lot of "we," a lot of "next shift," and not much that could turn into bulletin board fuel. It wasn't curt, it was calm. From their perspective, players understood that the message had weight. If the room lived on details, stick position, shoulder checks, two-touch exits, there wasn't much value in talking about anything else. Captains redirected questions toward process. Coaches kept answers tidy, even after wild finishes. The subtext was consistent. The story is the work, not the noise around it. Reporters learned the rhythm. Game nights, you got short, clean thoughts and a steady temperature. Off days, if you'd built trust, you got context. How a third man's route shifted after the trapezoid rule, why a defenseman changed his stick lie to flatten his blade in lanes, or what a face-off play was designed to create on the second touch. The currency was respect. If you framed the game through habits, the team opened up. If you chased fireworks, the quotes ended fast. Anyway, moving past the headlines, the organization set tone from the top. Lou Lamoriello believed in uniform presentation. Suits on the road, hair neat, message aligned. It wasn't image for image's sake. It kept the focus on the ice and removed distractions before they could multiply. Media access stayed structured. There was time for questions, but not for guesswork about who spoke for the room. Coaches addressed systems. Captains handled temperature. Role players talked about their pieces. Simpler lanes meant fewer collisions. The no individuality tag got tossed around, but inside, individuality lived in execution, not quotes. Patrick Elias could explain a read without turning it into theatre. Martin Brodeur could break down why a soft bump off the rim mattered more than a flashy glove save without inching into self-promotion. Scott Stevens could talk posture and presence without puffing his chest. The thing is, when your leaders model that tone, the room follows. Beat writers adapted. They told quieter stories because that's where the insight sat. How practice reps on retrievals turned a series in May. Why a third-pair defenseman's gap decisions mattered against a specific rush line, or how assistants tweaked the 1-1-3 late in periods on the road. The organization didn't hand you controversy, it handed you craft. If you wanted drama, you looked across the river. If you wanted a blueprint, you stayed in Newark. There were tense nights, sure. Slumps, injuries, post-lockout adjustments that didn't click right away. Even then, the quotes held the line. We need cleaner exits. We can't cheat F3. Our gaps were off by a stride. It sounded repetitive until you watched the next game and saw those notes corrected in real time. The message wasn't spin, it was a checklist. Meanwhile, the national cameras sometimes missed the nuance. A low-event game reads flat in a quick package. But playoff series taught the lesson. Networks leaned on telestrators to show denial layers and counters born from patience. The Devils didn't change for television. Television learned to see what the room valued. That's media relations by demonstration. Local broadcasts were partners in tone. Analysts circled stick lanes and arrival times, praised a clean bump-out with the same warmth they used for a highlight goal, and educated an audience that liked to exhale with control. The production matched the identity. Replays that lingered on a face-off set piece, intermission hits that walked through a subtle coaching adjustment, audio that caught a bench call and turned it into a teachable moment. From their perspective, players appreciated that equilibrium. Fewer fires to put out meant more time to practice and more energy on the next game. The club protected privacy during injuries, avoided public call-outs, and kept internal accountability where it lives best, inside the room. That trust created a loop. Deliver the plan, own mistakes, speak plainly, move on. Reporters knew the cadence, fans learned it by feel. The real insight is New Jersey's media approach mirrored their hockey. Low risk, high clarity. Say little, mean it, and make the proof the next shift. It wasn't designed to charm, it was designed to last. And for a long stretch in this state, that quiet excellence did exactly what the system did. Kept the noise outside and the work on schedule. The system's evolution under different coaches. The thing is, the map stayed the same, but the guides had different voices. Jacques Lemaire, Larry Robinson, and Pat Burns didn't rewrite New Jersey hockey. They tuned it, each in a way that fit the roster and the moment. Lemaire taught the language. Calm bench, short shifts, neutral zone layers that ask players to think early and move like pieces from the same set. Under him, the trap wasn't about strangling play. It was about buying clean touches. Practices sharpened angles and sticks until the habits felt like reflex. He framed risk as a choice you make only when the picture says yes. The result was hockey that looked simple because the hard work happened before the puck arrived. Larry Robinson followed with the same spine and a softer hand on the skill. He gave defensemen permission to hold the blue with support underneath, and nudged the breakout from glass and out to two-touch and gone. The message landed gently: trust your read, but bring a layer with you. Forwards could flow off the wall into space because the center lived low on time. That tweak didn't break the trap, it breathed air into it. The team started to look like what it already was: a defense-first group that could turn control into attacks without blinking. Pat Burns turned the dial from patient to firm. Same structure, heavier edges. He wanted first body position, then the puck, then play, and he demanded the timing that makes those steps automatic. Forechecks took a sharper first stride, but the third man stayed honest. At the line, defensemen closed with feet and angles, meeting carriers at the dots, not drifting to the hash marks. You could feel the system's tone change without its shape changing. It wore on opponents. Shift after shift, the rink felt shorter. Anyway, moving past the names, the assistants were the wire that kept power flowing. Larry's room had voices like Jacques' room did, teachers who could translate the same rules to different players. When the game tilted towards speed, after enforcement cracked down on obstruction, that staff didn't panic. They toggled between 1-2-2 and 1-1-3, depending on score, opponent, and period length. The third forward became less of a parked sign and more of a sliding lid. The emphasis didn't leave the middle, it moved with the puck. Personnel forced nudges that never turned into lurches. With a puck-moving back end, Robinson layered more controlled exits and encouraged weak-side pops. With heavier forward groups, Burns leaned on wall wins and low-cycle support, not just stretch. Lemaire, even in later returns, kept the North Star. If the middle is yours, the rest arrives on time. He'd tighten the bench when the map frayed, then widen it again once rhythm returned. It read like steadiness because it was. Unknown to most outside, the farm mirrored the updates. If the big club shifted the hinge on the breakout, Albany did it on Tuesday, so a call-up could do it on Saturday. Video kept pace. Coaches paused clips at the same landmarks: shoulder check, first touch, first pass, and graded execution the same way regardless of sweater number. That's how evolution felt like continuity. The demands didn't change, the solutions adjusted. Opponents felt the difference in playoff series. One spring, entries died at the line because the 1-1-3 swallowed middle ice. Another spring, the Devils angled rushes into short cycles, then strangled the second chance. On tapes, you can watch the same team answer different threats with the same idea. Own the first touch, protect the middle, and attach offense to defense. The roster changed, the posture didn't. There's a cost to that kind of fidelity. When rules clipped goalie roaming or narrowed the grey areas on grabs, the margin for error got thinner. New Jersey's answer was to move more with feet, less with hands, and let reads carry the weight that friction used to carry. Centers lived lower a beat earlier. Defensemen shouldered sooner on retrievals. Wingers turned blind chips into deliberate bump-outs. The trap didn't disappear, it got faster and cleaner. From their perspective, players appreciated that evolution because it kept the asks clear. You knew what got you on the ice: above the puck roots, first touch poise, timing that makes support look like instinct. You also knew you weren't getting whiplash from system of the month. Different coaches, same sentence, spoken at different volumes. The real insight is New Jersey's system didn't survive because it was stubborn. It survived because it was specific. Clear rules travel. Lemaire wrote them, Robinson balanced them, Burns hardened them. The tweaks fit the roster and the era, but the idea never moved. Control space first, then take the puck, then decide when to risk. Quiet, adaptable, and still the same map. The salary cap era, new challenges. A hard cap doesn't just change payroll, it changes how you think. For New Jersey, the post-2005 landscape took a team built on continuity and asked it to prove that the map could survive with fewer anchors and more moving parts. Which means the core idea, control the middle, win first touches, had to live inside stricter math. Veteran-heavy rosters with layered experience got expensive fast. The cap put a clock on chemistry. Contracts that once aged quietly could suddenly squeeze out a third-pair defenseman who knew every retrieval call, or a depth center who won ugly draws in May. You couldn't keep everyone who fit. You had to recreate fit on schedule. Front office work turned from collecting perfect pieces to balancing perfect habits with cap hits. Age curves mattered. Term mattered more. If a veteran's game relied on strength and posture, you asked how long that posture would hold before feet slowed. If a younger player had the reads but not the reps, you projected whether the room could carry his mistakes while the price stayed friendly. The trap era's certainty met the cap era's churn. Anyway, moving past the spreadsheets, the bench felt it in daily rhythm. Coaches rolled lines with more sensitivity to development. A third-line winger with a small number and big brain got sheltered starts until his wall work proved playoff ready. A second pair might feature one stable veteran and one cost-controlled mover, the pairing chosen as much for psychology as for pair play. Let the kid breathe, keep the map intact. It wasn't just talent allocation, it was stress allocation. The farm became a pipeline out of necessity, not luxury. Albany and later the affiliates had to graduate players who spoke the language quickly because replacement dollars were thin. Retrieval to exit habits that took 2 seasons to bake needed to come out of the oven in 1. Drills tightened, video got sharper, and feedback closed loops faster. If a call-up arrived on Friday, he had to play a reliable F3 on Saturday, or the cap forced another move on Monday. There was one problem you couldn't finesse. Late career stars earned what they'd built, and their contracts lived across years the legs didn't always match. The organization had to thread that needle, honor the past, protect the present. The solution was the same as it had always been: assignment of tasks. A star with fewer miles left took offensive zone weight and second unit minutes that preserved his impact. Defensive chores flowed to cheaper legs with steadier recoveries. Pride absorbed some of it because the room respected the standard. Not easy, but doable. Matchups shifted under the cap too. Deep rivals reloaded with entry-level deals and speed, pushing New Jersey to add more pace without breaking shape. The answer wasn't to chase end to end. It was to sharpen feet inside the same lanes. Centers lived lower a beat earlier, then skated out of the zone with intent. Defensemen held lines with angles and retreats that ended on time, not with grabs. The picture got faster, but stayed readable. Trades turned surgical. You couldn't buy redundancy, you had to buy need. A face-off specialist slotted into 3 game states. A right-shot defenseman with clean first passes freed a lefty to hold the blue line. Moves were less about names and more about minutes you could trust under cap pressure. If a player's game didn't translate to the map by March, you couldn't carry it into May. The cap removed sentiment, the system removed guesswork. From their perspective, players felt the churn on the edges more than the center. The asks never changed. Above the puck, first touch, 2-touch exits. What changed was who stood next to you from year to year. Leadership filled that gap. Veterans taught the calls in quiet moments, on the bench, in the hallway, in a clip review after practice. The quicker a new voice spoke the dialect, the quicker the line felt whole. Let's be honest, the cap era shortened windows. It also rewarded clarity. Teams without an identity spent money trying to find one. New Jersey already had a spine. The challenge was maintaining muscle around it at the right price. Some years, the balance held and the machine looked like itself. Other years, injuries and contracts pulled at the map's edges and the game frayed. The real insight is the cap didn't make the Devils change who they were. It made them prove it, cost by cost, season by season. Efficiency wasn't just a style anymore, it was a budget plan. When the numbers and the habits lined up, the room still felt familiar. Quiet, disciplined, and built to outlast noise. The prospect development system. The thing is, development wasn't a mystery box in New Jersey, it was translation. The farm existed to turn the same map into muscle memory at a slower speed, then inch it up until the pace matched the league. Prospects didn't just skate drills, they learned a language. Retrieval, shoulder check, first touch, exit. Above the puck, hinge, F3. Those words meant specific actions, graded on tape, every day. Practice built the spine. Defensemen ran retrieval ladders, coach rimming from different angles, a first shoulder check called out loud, a second one quiet, then a touch into a middle outlet that arrived on time because the center's clock matched the drills. If the pass bobbled, the rep restarted. The point wasn't punishment, it was rhythm. Do it right twice, do it right again under a little heat, then do it right when you're tired. That's how a habit survives a call-up. Forwards learned wallcraft in layers. Day 1 was position, hips on the inside, hands soft. Day 2 added a defender leaning hard. Day 3 added a second pressure from the top. The read never changed. If the middle's there, bump. If it's not, eat and wait for help. If it breaks, chip to a safe spot with a number. Those exits looked quiet from the stands. On film, they were little wins stacked into territory. Centers wore 2 hats early. Face-off reps came with set outcomes. Win weak side, tie and rake, lose and seal. But their bigger test lived between the tops of the circles, living low enough to be an automatic hinge on breakouts, then arriving high on time to become F3. Video paused on that first stride out of the zone, again at the red line. If the center floated, the clip stopped and the lesson repeated. Your line breathes because you're the lung. Anyway, moving past the drills, the schedule did work too. Back-to-backs in the AHL forced the same economy the big club prized. Coaches shortened shifts, demanded clean changes, and called the same late-game toggles. 1-1-3 to protect, 2-1-2 to chase. So prospects felt the decision tree before they faced NHL speed. When a call-up happened, he wasn't learning a new book. He was reading a familiar chapter faster. Communication kept it aligned. Development coaches sat in on NHL meetings in camp, then echoed the same points in Albany a month later. Assistant coaches rotated between levels during breaks. Same words, same map, was a mantra for a reason. When a prospect arrived, the bench didn't have to translate. A quick, low swing, or inside dots, carried years of practice behind it. Strength and conditioning matched the picture. It wasn't about max numbers, it was about posture under contact and repeatability late. Lifts favored holds, not just pulls. Time under tension that mirrors a board battle. Conditioning built recoveries, not marathon lungs. If a winger could hit, stop, and hit again in 10 seconds, his shift looked like New Jersey hockey. Feedback stayed specific and calm. After games, players watched clips that started a beat earlier than they expected. Before the turnover, before the rim, to teach that the moment that matters happens just before the puck shows up. That's how instincts sharpen. Decision speed increases because the decision begins earlier in the play. From their perspective, prospects knew the reward. If you hit the marks, you got hard minutes fast. Penalty kill reps, defensive zone draws, last-minute posture with a lead. The club didn't hand out candy shifts to impress anyone. It handed out trust, and trust traveled up the ladder. A call-up who kept the middle and made 2-touch exits earned a second game, then a week, then a spot. Let's be honest, Not everyone clicked. Players who needed the puck to feel engaged often fought the rhythm. The system didn't punish skill, it asked skill to tie itself to timing. The ones who made it added layers without losing the spine. Delay above the dots, attack on green lights, change on time. That's development, New Jersey style. Same map, clearer reads, and a pace that grows with you until the NHL just feels like a faster version of what you already know. The legacy in the record books. The thing is, the Devil's story doesn't thump its chest. It shows up on a ledger. You feel it when you scan the columns. Wins stacked year after year, goals against shaved to tidy numbers, playoff rounds handled with a routine calm. It's a legacy you can point to without raising your voice. Start with the spine, sustained prevention. For long stretches, New Jersey lived near the top in fewest goals allowed, season after season. That wasn't an accident, it was the map paying dividends. Deny the middle, clean the first touch, and suddenly your goalie faces shots he can see, at angles you've chosen. Over time, that control turns into math. Goals against per game slides under the league average and stays there. Penalty kills live in the high tiers because lanes are habits, not adrenaline. It's the slow build of a franchise trend line that doesn't wobble when the calendar flips. Meanwhile, the crease became a glossary entry for longevity. Martin Brodeur's records, games, wins, shutouts, didn't arrive by spectacle. They accumulated because the environment snapped into focus every night. He played more because he was asked to manage, not chase. He saw pucks, handled rims, and ate minutes that would break most bodies. Add it up, and you get piles of starts, piles of wins, and goose eggs that read like folklore. The record book isn't subtle about his name. It shouldn't be. Team marks tell the same tale at a different scale. Points totals that crept into the hundreds with quiet frequency. Division banners earned with steady months rather than hot weeks. Playoff streaks that lasted into the spring as a habit, not a surprise. When the Devils did lift the big trophy, those series weren't improbable runs. They were the logical peak of a yearly baseline. You can see it in the rounds won by limiting shots, not chasing them, and deciding series where the total score feels lower than the pressure did. Face-offs too. Not flashy, but you can track seasons where the dot worked like a lever. Draws won in the defensive zone that bled 30 seconds off a penalty. Offensive zone sets that led to a shot, then a seam, then a change with the puck 50 feet up ice. Over time, those little possessions live in the numbers, tucked into better expected goals against, better shot suppression, better control of the first 10 seconds after a whistle. It's a record without confetti, touches that steer games. And if you zoom out, there's a cluster of individual careers that look modest until you stack them. Forwards who piled up points in the 60s and 70s by playing the percentages, not chasing the rush. Defensemen with plus-minuses that make more sense when you remember they started half their shifts inside their own blue line and still walked out in control. Minutes leaders who wore the tough matchups and kept the scoreboard quiet enough for the rest to breathe. Hall of Fame plaques that read understated because the work was. What nobody made noise about at the time is now easier to quantify. Modern analytics, possession measures, expected goals, microstats, reach back and nod. The Devils' best years look even cleaner under today's lenses. Zone denial turns into fewer quality looks. Quick exits raise controlled entry rates the other way. The old eye test, calm games, low chaos, shows up as a positive shot share and better chances created per touch. If you value sustainability, the record book and the spreadsheet are saying the same thing. There's a human ledger too, coaching trees that branch out from those benches and carry pieces of the language to other cities. Goalies who grew up watching Brodeur handle the puck and asked their coaches for trapezoid work as kids. Defensemen who learned that stick lies and blade angles can shave goals off a season. The state's youth rinks filled with quiet details that win shifts on weekends. None of that fits in a team media guide, but it's a record just the same. Let's be honest, some records will be passed. Eras change, schedules expand, rules bend. But the shape of New Jersey's entry in the book is durable. It says, "Control travels." You can build a decade on it. And when you do, the columns stay neat, the banners feel earned, and the arguments about style fade when the totals don't. Conclusion: the quiet machines echo. The thing is, the Devils proved that calm can win. Habits under heat, space before speed, and a team that shares one picture. If you want more low-key stories that help you unwind while seeing the game more clearly, subscribe and stick around. And if you're ready for the next layer, how another team bent the sport in its own quiet way, cue up the next one and let it roll.